Chapter 760. I still haven't found anything strange about this place. We've already turned over half of the city. Yun Nuoshing and the others didn't stop. In half a day, they turned the southern part of the city upside down. However, other than what they saw at the beginning, they didn't find anything else. Other than the incomplete 6 paths of reincarnation technique and the words written on the skyward monument, there didn't seem to be any traces or valuable things left behind. Hey, do we really not need to pay attention to that thing? Chu Yingzhan couldn't help but ask as they passed by the city lord's mansion again, pointing at the vast land full of ruins. Don't worry, it's okay. The complete chapter is with me. Yun Nuoshing pointed at his head, then smiled and said, If I'm not wrong, the 6 paths of reincarnation technique should be able to tear open the space crack here and return to the normal space. Hearing this, Chu Yingzhan couldn't help but mutter, I'm still very concerned about the sarcophagus below. Stop, if you want to go, you can go by yourself. I really don't want to go down again. I still have a psychological trauma about the underground. Hearing her mention the underground, Yun Nuoshing's face darkened, and he rolled his eyes. You're afraid of death. What's there to be afraid of in a tomb? Isn't it just some stuff buried after death? When they were alive, they were just like us. They've been dead for so many years, so why are you still afraid? Chu Yingzhan rolled her eyes at him. I don't know who's holding on to me down there. Yun Nuoshing looked at her in annoyance, then shook his head. When I was walking down there, I felt very uneasy. There was an indescribable strangeness. In the end, we didn't find the reason why the souls of the gods buried there mutated. Maybe there's an answer in the sarcophagus, but we can't understand the runes on it, so there's no way to open it. In any case, I really want to run right now. I don't want to stay here for even a moment longer. In this strange place, every inch of space is filled with a strange aura, making me feel very uncomfortable. Yun Nuoshing rubbed the space between his eyebrows and sighed. He had been to many places in the past few years. He had been to the Forbidden Land, the Tianshan Taoist Court, and the Deep Sea, but none of the places made him feel so uneasy. Even in the Forbidden Land, there was no such commotion. It made him want to turn around and leave. Coward! Chu Yingzhan muttered in a very low voice. She originally thought that her voice was already soft enough, but she didn't expect that Yun Nuoshing would still hear it. Seeing him angrily glaring at her, Chu Yingzhan shuddered and immediately said with a flattering smile, All right, this fairy was wrong. Don't stare at me like that, it's so scary. Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes. You also know how to be scared? Chu Yingzhan snorted and turned her head, rolling her eyes at him. She was also a little confused. Although she couldn't see through Yun Nuoshing's realm, she could still sense the energy he used unintentionally. He should only be a demonic rank 2 seal, but she was a demigod rank 8. Yet, she felt like there was no difference between them. In fact, when she faced him, she felt a sense of pressure from the bottom of her heart. This pressure was much stronger than when she faced Yi Shi, so she didn't dare to speak without restraint. Let's go to the northern city to find Yang Qian and the others. If there's nothing else, let's go out, Yun Nuoshing said. Xian and Yi Shi nodded, and Chu Yingzhan could only nod. However, she really couldn't let go of that stone coffin and what the heaven-facing monument said. This world should be in the star field, but why did it fall into the myriad god realm? She was very curious and wanted to know everything. She wanted to understand everything, but when she turned around and saw Yun Nuoshing looking like he couldn't wait to leave, she felt a little dejected. It seemed that she could only suppress this matter. After all, no matter how stubborn she was, she really didn't dare to go there alone. In a short while, they went from the most difficult part of this dilapidated city to the heaven-facing monument in the middle. Before Yun Nuoshing and the others could go to the north, they saw Yang Qian and the others gathered in front of the heaven-facing monument. Moreover, there were many more people. These people seemed to be the ones who got separated at the beginning. Yang Qian. The sudden call woke Yang Qian, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground. He hurriedly stood up and saw Yun Nuoshing and the others descend from the sky and land in front of them, giving them a fright. Have you finished exploring the north? Yun Nuoshing glanced at the north. I guess so. I didn't find anything noteworthy. I don't think there's anything left in this place. Yang Qian nodded and sighed. There was a bitter look on his face. Not only did they not get anything from this trip, they even lost 6 people. He felt a little helpless. Yun Nuoshing saw his expression, thought for a moment, and said, There are deductions left behind by a few deities in the southern city Lord Manor. It's very scary. If you're not careful, you'll fall into it. Moreover, there's a way out. Really? Yang Qian's heart skipped a beat. He looked at him in disbelief, and many thoughts ran through his mind. Yes, there's no time to lose. Let's go out now. If we stay here for too long, we'll feel uncomfortable. Yun Nuoshing nodded. Hearing this, Yang Qian thought for a moment and also nodded. Anyway, he had the key with him, and there would be opportunities to come back in the future. The discovery of this trip had already proved that this place was not something they could interfere with. It was better to leave first. Seeing that he agreed, Yun Nuoshing smiled faintly. He did not care about what Yang Qian was thinking and also nodded. Then, the power of space and the 6 paths of reincarnation circulated together. His palm gently moved in front of him, and a wide spatial crack suddenly tore open. What was outside was the original forest of the Sky Fantasy mountain range. It worked. Yun Nuoshing was a little surprised to see that the spatial crack was torn open in one try. He thought that they would have to leave the city, or that they would have to try a few more times to succeed. Looking at the familiar sky outside, everyone couldn't help but let out a mournful howl. They could finally leave this place. Staying in this godforsaken place for half a month was simply torture. Be careful. Let's go. Seeing that Yun Nuoshing nodded, Yang Qian also waved his hand and led the others into the spatial crack. After all of them left, Yun Nuoshing let Xian and the others go first. Finally, he kept a close eye on Chu Yingzhan to prevent her from doing anything stupid. I won't be impulsive. That place is so creepy. I don't dare to go alone. Are you satisfied now? Seeing that he was staring at her, Chu Yingzhan pouted and looked at Yun Nuoshing with an aggrieved expression. He could not help but laugh bitterly. Wasn't he afraid that she would really do something stupid? Before leaving the spatial crack, Chu Yingzhan turned back to look at the place behind her. After a while, she sighed and entered the spatial crack. Yun Nuoshing also hurriedly followed. When the spatial crack closed, no one could see that the rundown city suddenly shook. It had been half a month since they left the burning flame city. It was only when they returned that they could finally relax. From the beginning to the end, no one had noticed them. After returning to Burning Flame City, Yang Qian hurriedly went to the branch of the Dragon Shadow Chamber of Commerce. Seeing that he was in a hurry, Yun Nuoshing did not say anything. He had already said what needed to be said. Looking at his posture, he guessed that he wanted some gods to explore. As for whether they could come out after entering, he did not care. He could only say that he would definitely not go to that place a second time. After returning, Chu Yingzhan also hurriedly bid farewell. Looking at the mysterious look on her face, Yun Nuoshing did not say much. They had met by chance and had known each other for half a month. Although they quarreled a lot along the way, their relationship could not be considered bad, but it could not be considered good either. He guessed that Xian and the other girls had already become friends. Or perhaps they had not. But to be honest, Yun Nuoshing felt that he was not qualified to care about that girl's matters. He should let her torment herself. 3 days later, in the training room of the mansion where Yun Nuoshing and the others were. Concentrate your energy and seal your soul within your body. Concentrate all your energy to condense your spirit and soul. Concentrate the origin of the 5 elements and release all the energy in the carrier. On the stone bed, a slender and beautiful figure sat cross-legged. Some fragrant sweat appeared on her beautiful face. Her clothes were also soaked in sweat, revealing her alluring curves. A 5-colored energy whirlwind blew around her body. 2 basin-sized balls of light released a dazzling light beside her body. A shocking energy was rapidly condensing. In front of Xian, Yun Nuoshing stood by the bed and pressed his palm gently on her head. The brilliant power of the stars illuminated her body, making it seem as if there were stars twinkling around her. With the influx of the power of the stars, the demonic aura in Xian's body also became turbulent. Not only did it not reject the existence of the power of the stars, but it also perfectly blended with it. The demonic aura was also subtly changing, and the energy carrier in her lower abdomen trembled slightly. When the energy in the carrier was completely drained, Xian's delicate body trembled slightly. She resisted the waves of dizziness that came from her mind and formed a hand seal with her trembling hands. As her hand seal changed, the demonic aura, 5 elemental energy, and power of the stars that filled her meridians all gathered towards her lower abdomen at the same time. However, they did not rush into the energy carrier in one go. Instead, they began to rapidly compress and condense at the side. Use more strength. The initial contact between the demonic aura and divine energy is more difficult than the previous 2 times. Use your soul and mental strength to suppress it. Don't worry about anything else. I'm right here. Yun Nuoshing's soft voice sounded in Xian's mind at an extremely appropriate time. Nodding slightly, Xian focused her mind. Majestic soul and mental strength gushed out and crazily kneaded the 3 energies together. She began to compress the 3 balls of energy that were originally the size of a fist. That majestic force also caused the 3 balls of energy to begin to resist, constantly surging and boiling. However, the power of the stars was controlled by Yun Nuoshing, and it did not really participate in the compression and fusion of the energies. It was only a regulator between the demonic aura and the 5 elemental energy. The degree of resistance from the demonic aura and the 5 elemental energy also gave Xian a fright. However, after a moment, she fiercely gritted her teeth. Her soul and mental strength gathered together and wrapped around the 2 balls of energy, then suddenly collapsed towards the center. The 2 balls of energy were also shocked by this violent force. After a momentary stalemate, they could not withstand it and were passively compressed. When the fist-sized ball of energy was compressed to the size of a fingernail, the black and 5-colored energies trembled slightly and suddenly fused together. The drop of energy that was born was not much different from the 5 elemental energy, except that its color was slightly darker. Perhaps it was due to the adjustment of the power of the stars, or perhaps it had accidentally fused a little bit of it. The dark 5-colored energy had a few sparkling spots of light. After the drop of energy was formed, Xian's delicate body trembled slightly again. Her clothes were soaked in sweat, tightly sticking to her delicate skin. The faintly discernible spring scenery made the secret room a little ambiguous all of a sudden. Taking a moment to catch her breath, Xian's mind moved. Her soul power wrapped around the new drop of energy, and she placed it into the energy carrier. As soon as the new drop of energy entered the energy carrier, the energy that had spread throughout her body suddenly seemed to be pulled. All of it rapidly circulated along her meridians, and then crashed into the energy carrier. Bang! A soft muffled sound quietly rang out from within her body. Xian's small mouth spat out a soft groan, and her pretty face paled. From emptying her energy to compressing it, and finally letting it pull on its own, she had exhausted all of her energy. With a light gasp, Xian's entire body fell to the side, exhausted. She leaned against Yun Nuoshing's body, and her voluptuous chest rose and fell violently with her rapid breathing. Her soaked clothes fell slightly, revealing a bit of her snow-white skin that would make people go crazy. Yun Nuoshing secretly took a glance, and dryly coughed in her heart without blushing or panicking. She then took off her windbreaker and covered Xian with it. She sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her into her arms. With a gentle smile, she said, "Little girl, congratulations. You're already a demigod rank powerhouse. Once you awaken your divinity, you'll be a full-fledged demigod rank. A 26 or 27-year-old demigod rank powerhouse. I reckon there aren't many in history. You're much more powerful than me. Yun Nuoxing's hand gently stroked Xian's dark purple hair as she smiled gently. Chapter 761. Did you succeed? The door of the practice room suddenly opened, and 3 peeping heads popped out from the corner of the door. When they saw the scene in the practice room, they were all stunned. Then they sensed Xian's aura, so they walked in with relief and sat down beside the bed. Okay. Yun Nuoxing nodded, then lowered his head to look at Xian, who was still gasping for breath. He hugged Xian a little tighter. Then awaken your divinity. Yishi nodded and walked to the bed. She made a gesture of cupping her hands and raised them slightly. Then, strands of golden light of divinity passed through her palms and condensed on her sleeves. Soon, it condensed into a ball of golden light full of light, and bits of golden particles flew around the ball of light. Now? Xian just finished his promotion. Why don't you rest for a while? Yun Nuoxing looked at Yishi, then looked at Xian. It's okay. And the best time to awaken your divinity is when you succeed in your promotion. When your body is at its weakest, it's also the most relaxed time. The divinity will completely cleanse your body, and Xian is now in a coma. He doesn't have to bear that kind of pain, Yishi said. Yun Nuoxing heard this, thought about it, and felt that it seemed to make sense, so he said, Okay, but will it be okay without the guidance of the Holy Awakening Tablet? Brother Nuo, I'm the God Emperor. I don't need that thing. The Holy Awakening Tablet is just to make it easier for low-level gods to help others awaken. For high-level gods, it's not essential. Even Brother Nuo, if you want, you can help others awaken their divinity, Yishi said, looking at him angrily. I'll pass. Yun Nuoxing scratched his head awkwardly. Yishi focused on condensing the ball of light in her hand into a thumb-sized golden crystal. She glanced at Xian, then climbed onto the stone bed. She held the golden crystal in her small hand and gently stuffed it into Xian's chest. The golden crystal slowly drilled into Xian's chest like liquid. Yun Nuoxing also focused, nervously holding Xian's jade-like hand, afraid that she would wake up from the pain. Yishi also held her breath in concentration. In her slender arm, strands of golden light flowed, like a brilliant golden river. Puff, however, just as the few of them were waiting, a soft sound attracted their attention. Soon after, they saw that the golden crystal had suddenly drilled out from Xian's chest and was sent flying. The golden crystal flew in the air and was caught by Feng Er. She looked down at the golden crystal in confusion, then looked at Yishi in confusion. She was a mythical beast, so she didn't have any divinity awakening process. Since she was born, divinity had been flowing in her soul and spirit, so she didn't know what was wrong. Yishi also opened her small mouth and looked at the person in Yun Nuoxing's arms with a strange expression. Then she took the golden crystal from Feng Er and stuffed it into Xian's body again, but this time it went into his smooth forehead. Yishi watched as some energy ripples appeared in front of her forehead. The golden crystal once again entered her body. Before she could even turn her gaze away, a golden light suddenly burst out and directly hit her forehead. She was stunned and didn't even care that a red dot had appeared on her forehead. Little she, what's going on? Yun Nuoxing reached out to take the golden crystal and looked at Yishi in confusion. Yishi rubbed her forehead and shook her head blankly. Just as she was about to mutter something, she seemed to have thought of something and raised her head in a daze. Then she put her small hand between Xian's eyebrows, and a wisp of soul power came out and went in between his eyebrows. When Yishi was investigating, Yun Nuoxing was worried. Although he didn't understand what this meant, he was very worried that Xian wouldn't be able to awaken his divinity like this. Sigh. After Yishi put down her hand, she let out a long sigh. This sigh made Yun Nuoxing's heart skip a beat. Was it really as he expected? I really can't help this time. Yi Shi sighed and shook her head, making Feng Er and Little Bing Er look serious. What's going on? This girl can't awaken her divinity? Yun Nuoxing looked nervous, and his heart sank. Yi Shi shook her head, then looked at Xian helplessly and said, because her divinity has already awakened. Yun Nuoxing and the others. Already awakened? Already awakened? What do you mean? Yun Nuoxing's cheeks twitched, and he looked down at Xian, feeling a little confused. It means exactly what it means. Xian's divinity has already awakened, and it's changing his body very gently. He'll probably be fine after a good night's sleep. Yi Shi threw the golden crystal into her mouth and swallowed it. Then, she licked her red lips and said, a long time ago, before the holy tablet and other methods to guide the awakening of divinity, everyone's divinity awakened on their own. This is also a difficult point. Some people have good awareness and awaken their divinity after a few days, but those who have poor awareness probably can't figure it out even after a few years, so there's no way for them to completely advance to the demigod level. For people like Xian, they probably awaken their divinity by accident. After all, the 5 elements body is close to the great path of heaven and earth. When Brother Noah reaches the demigod level, his divinity will probably automatically awaken. It's just that his divinity will be awakened ahead of time, Yi Shi said. Yun Nuoxing scratched his cheeks. It sounded like there was nothing wrong with it. Now, many things he just thought of dissipated, and he let out a big sigh of relief. Yi Shi's wine-red eyes turned, and she seemed to have thought of something. She couldn't help but tease. I suggest that Brother Noah put Xian back in the room and wait for her to awaken her divinity before going to see her. You'll be surprised. Yun Nuoxing stared blankly. But after a moment Yi Shi waved her small hand and said, forget it. It won't be too late to do this when Xian reaches the demigod level. It's still a bit early. You don't understand. Yun Nuoxing tilted his head and looked at her in confusion. Exhaling softly, Yun Nuoxing closed his eyes. His consciousness followed the astral energy and gradually sank into Xian's body, going straight to her lower abdomen. Looking at the energy carrier there, he could feel that the original demon chi and the 5 elements energy inside were slowly being assimilated by the new energy. Although the volume was more than 10 times smaller, the energy contained inside was definitely more than 100 times stronger than before. The energy compression this time wasn't simply compressing the demon chi to cause a qualitative change and finally turning it into divine yuan. Instead, it was compressing and fusing the demon chi and the 5 elements energy together to cause a qualitative change. Just like Yun Nuoxing's astral energy, although it was separated from the path of divine yuan, this energy would only be stronger than divine yuan. If there's nothing else, let's go and rest. When Xian wakes up, we'll go to the elemental plane. Gently stroking Xian's beautiful hair, Yun Nuoxing looked out of the window. They had been out for more than half a month, and there was only a month left for them. Counting the time they had spent on the road, this month wouldn't be too long. The next morning, 2 fiery red suns spurted out strands of multicolored light, reflecting the mist in the space, sprinkling down traces of light. On the horizon, one beautiful mountain peak after another was gradually dyed red. Yun Nuoxing woke up early and stood on the roof of her residence. She looked at the awakened burning flame city, then looked at the Yanli Academy, and finally stared straight at the 2 suns that had also just woken up. Only when 2 black spots were left in front of her eyes did she close her eyes. Facing the 2 suns, she took a few deep breaths, as if she was absorbing the essence of the sun. Her entire body was bathed in the golden red light. Little star, you're awake? The soft sound behind him stunned Yun Nuoxing. He turned around in shock. He didn't expect this girl to recover so quickly. He thought that she would be unconscious for another 2 or 3 days. Ziyan also jumped onto the roof of the mansion. She had freshened up a little, and her hair was still a little wet. Her snow-white dress dragged on the ground. She stood beside him, facing the morning glow. A cool breeze blew past, and her clothes fluttered along with her long hair. There was a gentle smile on her beautiful face, and her eyes were like crescent moons. Her graceful figure was covered in the golden morning light, and her entire person emitted a faint golden luster. She became more and more transcendent. Her ethereal temperament was like a goddess that did not belong to this world. Yun Nuoshing rubbed his eyes, suspecting that he hadn't washed his face properly. However, when he took a closer look, he couldn't help but gasp in surprise. This girl had become even more beautiful after awakening her divinity. She had become even more ethereal. That mesmerizing smile would probably subdue many people under her pomegranate dress, especially that pair of starry eyes that were filled with unconcealable confidence, instantly raising her temperament to an extremely high level. Mesmerizing without paying for it. TSK, TSK, TSK. Yun Nuoshing couldn't help but smack his lips. This girl, he probably wouldn't be able to subdue her in the future. No wonder Yi Shi said that she had to wait until she reached the elementary deity level. At that time, her divinity would be stimulated to perfection. At that time, Xian's temperament would probably be like a fairy. Xian tilted her head and smiled sweetly at him. She reached out her lily-white hands and tightly hugged Yun Nuoshing into her embrace. She pursed her cherry lips and lightly tapped his cheek. Yun Nuoshing raised his eyebrows and lightly touched Xian's smooth forehead with his forehead. Then, he gently extricated himself from her soft embrace, held her lily-white hand, and jumped into the courtyard. He smiled faintly and said, "Let's go, let's continue our journey." Yun Nuoshing and the rest tidied up a little, woke up a few lazy bums, and closed the shop that had only done 2 transactions. Before they left, Bing Er even brought Yun Nuoshing and the rest to the food street to pack up a huge pile of food. Seeing how fast they were spending money, Yun Nuoshing's face couldn't help but twitch. This girl probably bought enough food for 5 people for a year. Bing Er asked Yun Nuoshing for a space ring. Satisfied, she packed up the food and left the food street, leaving behind a group of despairing shop owners. They hastily ended their business for the day. The ingredients were all cooked and packed up. Outside the eastern city walls of Burning Flame City, Yun Nuoshing glanced at the Burning Flame College. She originally wanted to greet Lu Feng and the rest, but after thinking for a while, she dismissed the idea. It would take half a day to go back and forth from the eastern city gate. At this moment, there were many people gathered outside the eastern city walls. They all looked like they were fully armed, and there were many god-level experts. Among them, the strongest person that Yun Nuoshing saw was an Emperor of the Netherworld expert. Furthermore, these people were all gathered together. The Emperor of the Netherworld led the team, and the sons of gods and divine kings were the team members. Those who didn't know would think that this was a team that was going to conquer the Forbidden Zone. Yi Shi's eyes turned, and her soul power silently spread out. After a while, she said to Yun Nuoshing and the rest, "The news about the Sky Illusion mountain range has spread. These people seem to want to explore the ancient city ruins." Yun Nuoshing was stunned and asked strangely, "Did Yang Qian and the rest spread the news?" "I'm not sure. Although I heard the news, I didn't know where it came from." Yi Shi shook her head. "Moreover, in the past 2 days, the space crack has been forcefully torn open and can't be closed. We can speculate that this is the work of a magic array grandmaster. There seems to be some changes in the ancient city. Many of those who trespassed died, and among them was a magic array grandmaster," Yi Shi said softly. "A rank 8? Yun Nuoshing was a little shocked. "Yes, he just reached rank 8. Perhaps it's fortunate that nothing happened when we went there," Yi Shi muttered. Yi Shi muttered with lingering fear. She then said, I heard some new news. This matter might be led by the Dragon Shadow Chamber of Commerce. We can already confirm that this information was released by Yang Qian. It's probably difficult for a Chamber of Commerce to swallow that place." Yun Nuoshing responded. He didn't care much about this matter. He didn't have any intention to explore that place. When he first stepped into that place, He felt uncomfortable all over. He didn't expect that something would really happen. After stopping for a while and not hearing any more news, Yun Nuoshing led the rest of the group and soared into the sky. They turned into a golden flowing light and disappeared into the horizon. Chapter 762. In the vast and boundless sky, a brilliant golden light flashed, tearing a small hole in space. The hole quickly healed, and the warm sunlight didn't make it seem like autumn or winter at all. If one looked closely at the golden light, they would discover that it was a giant purplish-black sword that was 10 meters long. A few girls were casually sitting on the giant sword, chatting and laughing along the way. The atmosphere was very cheerful, and there wasn't any sense of boredom. These girls were naturally Yun Nuoshing and the others. However, the figure of the rainbow-haired youth had disappeared again, and he had turned into a rainbow-haired girl. This time, he had even dressed up meticulously. It was obvious that he had been tormented by Xian and the others while he was sleeping. The girls seemed to have unknowingly turned dressing up Yun Nuoshing into a form of entertainment. Every time they saw him getting angry and unable to open his mouth, they couldn't help but giggle. "Can you stop messing around like this? My heart is so tired." Yun Nuoshing looked dejectedly at the girls who were smiling like flowers. The clothes he was wearing were getting more and more beautiful day by day, and he was getting more and more noble day by day. He could no longer see the characteristics of a young man, and he estimated that if he wore women's clothes for a long time, he would probably go crazy, although that was what he thought. He didn't know how many times he had worn women's clothes, but his mind was still as stable as ever. No. Xian and the others giggled as they looked at him, their hands fiddling with his body. Yun Nuoshing's cheeks twitched and he was about to cry. Along the way they would occasionally stop for a day when they saw a city and ask for directions. Until now they still hadn't found where the so-called elemental plains was. They only heard from Lu Feng that it was roughly in the northeast. As for how far it was, they didn't know. This place wasn't marked on the treasure map either. Speaking of this treasure map, Yun Nuoshing discovered something strange. Everything that happened in the God realm after the ancient era, such as what mountain ranges were formed, or what additional things were added, wasn't marked on the map. The most direct observation was the 4 great holy cities of the divine prefecture. The 4 great holy cities on the treasure map were drawn by Yun Nuoshing himself. Yuanding City. Based on its name alone, one might think that it was a big city that focused on forging cauldrons. However, in reality, it was a city that focused on alchemy. In this city that spanned hundreds of thousands of miles, alchemy could be said to be popular throughout the entire city. Although its location was a little remote, it was still very famous in the Ganyuan region. In the gods' world, there were many secondary professions that had been passed down since ancient times. Many secondary professions had become simple to begin with, and there were no longer too many restrictions. Aside from alchemists who needed the element of metal, there was a branch of alchemy that anyone could come into contact with. However, if one wanted to make a name for themselves and become a true alchemist, they would need to possess the element of fire. Aside from that, even if they borrowed fire from others, they could still complete alchemy. However, this didn't make alchemists seem cheap. It was hard to say whether alchemists were better than alchemists or blacksmiths. It could only be said that they each had their own strengths and couldn't be directly compared. Alchemists were the same as other secondary professions. They were talents that the major forces were in short supply of. When this group of people gathered together, it would drive the movements of the major and minor forces. In Yuanding City, it was possible to meet an alchemist just by walking on the street. It was also because of this that many forces would recruit alchemists here. With so many forces gathered together, the city became particularly chaotic. Tsk. Thousands of miles high in the sky, Yun Nuoshing and the others appeared outside Yuanding City. When they looked down at the exquisite city that was built with uncanny workmanship, they couldn't help but click their tongues in admiration. The exquisite layout started from the city walls, which were divided into several layers and spread towards the center. The city walls were thousands of feet high and were so white that they reflected the sunlight. Looking at the city walls from the outside, it was incomparably dazzling. But looking from the inside, one could only see that it was a white city wall. There was nothing special about it. Within the white city walls, huge strings of golden runes flickered. One could faintly feel a terrifying energy fluctuation surging in the air, causing one to be intimidated just by looking at it. In the sky above the city, there was an inverted bowl that spanned hundreds of thousands of miles, enveloping the entire city. With the airspace sealed, if one wanted to enter the city, they could only pass through the 4 city gates in the north, south, east, and west. Even Nether King experts could only obediently land on the ground and walk through the city gate. Anyone who descended from the sky would be judged as an attack by the array and thus be defended. This defensive barrier seems to be set up by a martial grandmaster. It covers Yuanding City all year round. Even Nether Kings would have to spend a lot of effort to break through it. As for God Emperors, it would be difficult for them to break through it in a short period of time. Yi Shi also looked down from the sky and smiled. I think, seeing Yun Nuoshing's terrible smile, Xian and the others couldn't help but smile bitterly. Yi Shi also hurriedly stopped him from having such thoughts. This defensive barrier was used to defend against the beast tide in the past. Although Big Brother Nuo can destroy it with a single strike of his sword, please don't do such a meaningless thing. I'm just saying. You're exaggerating. Yun Nuoshing crossed his arms and lightly snorted. Did they really think he was a little tyrant who could tear down a city? Let's go. Obediently walk through the city gate. What is Big Brother Nuo looking for? Called again. Yi Shi smiled helplessly and changed the topic. Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing took out a crystal ball from his pendant and glanced inside. He said, colored glass spirit sand, mixed yuan iron essence, star omen stone, boundless divine crystal. Hearing Yun Nuoshing list out more than 20 things in detail, Yi Shi felt a headache coming on. At least half of the things listed were things she had never heard of before. The other half that she had heard of made her feel a little apprehensive. Primal Chaos Immortal Stone. When Yun Nuoshing listed out one of them, Yi Shi's expression changed slightly. She looked up in a daze and said in astonishment, Primal Chaos Immortal Stone? HM? Yun Nuoshing stopped and looked up at her. He nodded. What's wrong? Nothing. Yi Shi shook her head. She felt a little apprehensive, but she didn't show it on her face. Why are you looking for so many high-grade materials? Some of them are even comparable to level 12 materials exclusive to gods. They can be ranked among the level 12 materials themselves. You're asking me. Can I say that I don't know? Yun Nuoshing put down the crystal ball and laughed dryly. Yi Shi and the others widened their eyes. Yun Nuoshing shrugged and said, Of course I'm not the one who is using these things. That guy at the Gathering Fate Pavilion asked me to look for them. I haven't heard of most of the things here. They don't belong to the realm of the gods. I have to go to other worlds to look for them. The Myriad Realm Book? Yi Shi couldn't help but ask when she thought of a possibility. Yun Nuoshing nodded and said, I didn't plan to tell you because it wasn't too important. I just didn't expect to hear about a few rare treasures here, so I came to take a look. Colored glass spirit sand, star omen stone. Xian muttered. They had heard about these things not long ago. They could be found in Origin Cauldron City, but it would be a little troublesome to obtain them. Heya, in this city where alchemy is second nature, 85% of the people are alchemists. Why would anyone collect these precious materials? Yun Nuoshing looked down at the city below and rolled her eyes. Then, she thought of something and smiled. It seems like we should take the alchemist test, right? Little star, how many years have you been thinking about it? You still remember? Xian couldn't help but smile. At that time, she had thought of taking the alchemist test at the Spatial Trade Fair in Lihuan City, but she still hadn't done it after so many years. Yun Nuoshing straightened her back and said righteously, "That's right, people of high status tend to be forgetful. That's right. Big Brother Nuo, with your half-baked theoretical knowledge, I'm afraid you can't even become a demon-grade alchemist," Yi Shi teased. Cough. Yun Nuoshing coughed dryly and rubbed Yi Shi's wine-red hair. She said, "With my talent, I can learn anything I want. I just need to put my heart into it." "That's right," Yi Shi muttered. Then, she was pulled into Yun Nuoshing's arms. The nethervoid sword shrunk back into Yun Nuoshing's body, and the group fell straight down to the ground. They suddenly descended from the sky and landed on the main road in front of the city wall. The sudden appearance of the few of them gave the surrounding people a fright. Just as they steadied themselves, Yun Nuoshing and the few of them walked towards the city. Along the way, they attracted the gazes of quite a number of people. In this group of people, even he was disguised as a young lady. The appearances of this group of people were all at the level of a calamity. Adding on their tall figures and their distant auras, it caused the surrounding gazes to become much hotter. Xian and the others were used to these heated gazes, but Yun Nuoshing still couldn't get used to it. He couldn't get used to people looking at him with such heated gazes. This level was still bearable for the time being. However, when he saw that some people seemed to want to come up and strike up a conversation, his eyes that were suffused with a substantial light suddenly narrowed. A wave of coldness quietly spread out, causing quite a few people to shiver and quickly shift their gazes away. The smiles of those people who walked up also froze. However, they still walked towards them and brushed past each other. The cold chill only quietly dissipated when they walked into this grand and unique city. "It's so cold." Yi Shi glanced at him and patted his thigh lightly. Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes when he heard this. He didn't want to be hit on by people for no reason. He wasn't a girl. As for hitting on the people around him, that would be even more wishful thinking. After entering the city, Yun Nuoshing scanned the city with his eyes. The population in the city had reached a frightening level. Although it wasn't as crowded as one another, it was almost there. The streets were more than 100 feet wide, but they were filled with people. On both sides of the streets, the most common things were some medicinal halls and alchemy shop. There were fewer other shops. The rich aroma of pills almost made one sneeze. This scene made Yun Nuoshing feel a little emotional. They had just entered, and it was only an ordinary shop, but the pills produced were already so powerful. He wondered how high the quality of the pills produced by the medicinal halls and alchemy shops near the center were. "Do you still remember the name of that place?" Yun Nuoshing turned around and looked at Xian. He calculated the time and felt that it might be better to go there now. Xian nodded and said, "It should be called Tianqin Hall. It is said that it is quite famous. However, there is only one boss, which means that there is only one alchemist." Hearing the name, Yun Nuoshing muttered to himself. Then, he pulled a passerby and asked for the location of Tianqin Hall. The passerby who was pulled by Yun Nuoshing had a straight face. However, when he saw Yun Nuoshing and the others, his eyes suddenly widened. He quickly pointed in a direction to Yun Nuoshing and the others and eagerly told them about Tianqin Hall in detail. "Fairies, if you are looking for a high-level alchemy hall, I recommend the Myriad Medicine House. It has the same name as Tianqin Hall. There is only one boss in Tianqin Hall, and he is very hot-tempered. He doesn't want to do business because he is a high-level, immortal-level alchemist. He even injured his customers. If you want to go there, you must be careful." After thanking the passerby who kept talking, Yun Nuoshing rubbed his stiff face. Then, he rolled his eyes and said, "Sure enough, girls have an innate advantage, so Little Star should be a girl." Xian covered his mouth and chuckled. Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes at her and reached out to ruffle her hair. Xian was already used to it and continued to look at him teasingly. After leaving the crowded area unhurriedly, Yun Nuoshing and the others sped up and jumped onto the roof. After a while, the medicinal hall named Tianqin Hall appeared in their line of sight. There were not many people in this area and it was a little quiet. There was only one medicinal hall nearby. There were no other shops and they were all empty. They landed on the street and looked at the shop. There was no smell of medicine here. The shop was a little old. One side of the signboard had fallen down and was hanging on it shakily. It was simple and unadorned, but it seemed too old. There were some cracks in the corners and it looked more like a dilapidated house. Yun Nuoshing's cheeks twitched slightly. He took a deep breath and nodded at Xian and the others. Then, he slowly walked into the shop. The interior of the store was not very spacious. A night pearl hung in the middle of a narrow passageway, illuminating the passageway. The interior of the store appeared rather cold and cheerless. Empty cabinets were placed in all four directions of the circular store. It seemed that something had been displayed in those places before. He glanced around and finally stopped in front of him. There, a figure was sleeping soundly with his head buried in the ground. Snoring sounds could be heard from his nose. He seemed to be sleeping soundly. Chapter 763. Yun Nuoshing and the others stood for a while and looked at the sleeping figure with interest. Although his sideburns were white, they could still feel his surging aura. This high-grade, immortal-grade alchemist was also a netherworld king expert. Yun Nuoshing opened his mouth a few times, wanting to wake him up, but he couldn't bear to do so. Yun Nuoshing hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he didn't say anything to disturb this person. He looked at the other parts of the shop. Although the cabinets were empty, and some of them were covered in a thick layer of dust, there were still some jade bottles and jade boxes placed in the middle. Inside the boxes there were all top-quality pills and herbs. The wooden cabinets were already worn to a certain extent. A casual touch might cause it to collapse. Yun Nuoshing picked up a jade bottle, opened the lid, and took a whiff of the elixir fragrance. Then, he closed the lid again and shook his head gently. Based on his experience of eating all kinds of peerless saint-grade elixirs, although these immortal-grade elixirs were precious, their quality was probably only low-grade among the immortal-grade elixirs. The elixir fragrance was also mixed with other smells. He didn't know if it was because they weren't preserved well or if there were some problems during the refining process. No wonder no one came. The quality of these elixirs is too low. Yishi also picked up a jade bottle. She took a whiff and wrinkled her little nose. What elixir fragrance! These elixirs are going to stink. Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly. Although the immortal-grade elixirs weren't preserved well, they weren't as bad as she said. However, with her strength and vision, it was normal that she didn't like them. Fortunately, we're not here to buy elixirs. If we buy elixirs here, we'll lose a lot of money. Yishi smacked her lips and put the jade bottle back on the wooden cabinet. She even patted her sleeves lightly as if she felt dirty just by touching it. It was unknown whether these words had awakened the gray-haired figure, or if he had just woken up, but the man suddenly raised his head from the counter, revealing an unsmiling face. His face was pale and slightly dry, and his eyebrows had all fallen off, but one could vaguely see that he was a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man raised his head. He didn't even open his eyes. He sniffed and suddenly began to drool. He chuckled and said, "The fragrance of a woman." Yun Nuoshing and Xian shuddered, and a chill suddenly appeared in their hearts. They instinctively felt that something bad was about to happen. Then, the middle-aged man suddenly opened his eyes. His greenish-white eyes were glowing. When he saw the girls who suddenly appeared in the shop, he couldn't help but grin and squint his eyes. His eyes were already very small, and when he squinted, they were almost invisible. He even used his malicious gaze to look at the girls wantonly. When his gaze landed on Yun Nuoshing, he didn't even stop for a second before he muttered, "Mediocre." Then, his gaze landed on Xian and the others. His eyes were almost glowing. Being stared at like this, the girls' expressions were a little unnatural. Yun Nuoshing's forehead was also bursting with blue veins. Fortunately, he wasn't a girl. Otherwise, with this sentence, he would have a reason to tear down the shop while he was at it. Yun Nuoshing took a step forward and blocked Xian and the others behind her. She took a deep breath and tried her best to put on a smile on her face. She said rather politely, "Mr. Miao, I heard that you have colored glass spiritual sand in your hands. Would you be willing to exchange it with me?" Bah, which big mouth is barking again. When the middle-aged man heard this, he spat and spit flew in the air. Then, he impatiently shook his hand. His eyes wanted to look through Yun Nuoshing and behind him. He cursed as he clamped his legs on the table and laughed sinisterly. "That's right, I have colored glass spiritual sand. I took it from a group of people in an ancient ruin. It could be said that I used my life to exchange for it. Do you understand?" Yun Nuoshing's cheeks twitched. She took a deep breath and said, "Colored glass spiritual sand is comparable to a 12th level material. Although it isn't listed as exclusive to the gods, it's still a rare forging treasure. Mr. Miao is an alchemy grandmaster. It's useless for you to have such a treasure. Why don't you exchange it with me? I have 2 sun essence demonic fruits here. It's the main ingredient of a high-grade saint pill. I'm sure Mr. Miao knows its value better than I do." Yun Nuoshing smiled faintly and flipped over her hand, taking out 2 fist-sized fruit. These 2 fruits emitted a sunlight that was as bright as the sun, illuminating the dark shop until it was extremely dazzling. Even some of the shredded paper on the ground started to burn silently, as if Yun Nuoshing was holding 2 suns in his hands, not 2 fruits. Yishi was also stunned. She quickly looked at Xian and asked, "Where did Brother Noah get these sun essence demonic fruits?" Xian covered Mei Mao and said softly, "Last time when I went to the Sun Moon Institute, I saw a Sun Moon spring. These were born in the spring, but one was ice and the other fire. Even if the people of the Sun Moon Institute knew about it, they wouldn't dare to pick it. We got lucky." When the sun essence demonic fruits appeared, the middle-aged man's lewd eyes shrank. He looked at the 2 suns with a serious expression, but this seriousness disappeared in a flash. Soon after, he became frivolous again and laughed. "Little girl, these sun essence demonic fruits are not bad, but colored glass spiritual sand is a 12th level treasure. Although I'm not a blacksmith, I have many blacksmith friends. They know the value of colored glass spiritual sand better than I do. Why don't I ask them to appraise it?" The corner of Yun Nuoshing's eyes twitched. Although the seriousness in the middle-aged man's eyes disappeared quickly, it couldn't escape his evil spirit eye. Although he couldn't see through the thoughts of an underworld king expert, how could he not know what this guy meant? "If you want to ask for a price, just say it." Taking a deep breath, Yun Nuoshing didn't put the 2 fruits away. He said indifferently, "Then what price does Mr. Miao plan to pay?" "Hee, the sunlight of this sun essence demonic fruit hasn't dissipated yet. It's obvious that it's been less than half a year since it was born. It must have been picked. Then I presume that you've also picked the other half of the moon's spring flower?" The middle-aged man grinned. Yun Nuoshing's expression turned serious. This guy was worthy of being a high immortal rank alchemist. The sun essence demonic fruit and the moon's spring flower were both born together. Those who had one would naturally be able to obtain the other. Both of them contained the splendor of the sun essence demonic fruit and the moon's spring flower. But this splendor would automatically return to the fruit after half a year. 2 stalks of moon spring flower and the pill formula for the sun moon fortune pill. I'll give you the 50 kilograms of colored glazed spirit sand. Without waiting for Yun Nuoshing to speak, the middle-aged man grinned and licked his lips. His pair of eyes looked behind Yun Nuoshing again. Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath and said, "Old Mr. Miao must be joking. I picked the sun moon essence demonic fruit by accident. I'm not an alchemist, so I won't collect pill formulas. Moreover, although the pill formula for the Sun Moon Fortune pill is a high saint rank pill, it can't even be compared to some low peerless rank pill formulas. With this pill formula, I can buy a few blocks of colored glazed spirit sand. Hearing this, the middle-aged man grinned and laughed sinisterly. He stuck out his tongue and licked his lips, causing Yun Nuoshing and the others to shudder. Why was this guy like a pervert? Soon after, they heard the former laugh sinisterly. Of course, that was just a casual remark. So? Yun Nuoshing raised her eyebrows. She felt that things weren't that simple. The middle-aged man chuckled and pointed behind Yun Nuoshing. With a lewd smile, he said, "Leave those little beauties behind and give me a sun essence demonic fruit and a lunar spring flower. Maybe I'll consider it." Hearing this, the tense smile on Yun Nuoshing's face instantly turned gloomy. She took a light breath and said calmly, "Old Mr. Meow, please don't joke around. You're an underworld king expert. Why do you have to tease us juniors?" Crack! The chair that was gently swaying suddenly stopped. The middle-aged man raised his head and the smile on his face faded. However, the green light in his eyes didn't shrink. Instead, it became stronger. He looked at Yun Nuoshing and the others with a smile that wasn't a smile. The open door closed with a bang and the temperature in the surroundings rose silently. That scorching aura pressed down on Yun Nuoshing and the others. Before it came into contact with them, Feng Er's jade-like hands trembled slightly and the flaming aura automatically avoided them. "Old Mr. Meow, I'm seriously discussing with you. During this period of time, I urgently need the colored glazed spirit sand. I hope that you can make an exception. As long as the price is suitable, I won't refuse." Yun Nuoshing's slightly tanned face still had a smile. Seeing that he was still suppressing the irritation in his heart, Xian couldn't help but smile. She gently poked his back with her jade-like hands, causing another vein on Yun Nuoshing's forehead to pop out. He couldn't help but transmit his voice, "Don't poke me. I'm afraid that I'll hit you if I can't hold it in." "Heh, I didn't expect that these little girls of yours would have some foundation." Seeing that Yun Nuoshing and the others weren't affected by his aura, the middle-aged man was also a little surprised. Soon after, he laughed sinisterly and said, "However, I'm also very seriously talking to you. Leave the little girls behind you behind. Of course, you can also stay behind. I think you're quite interesting." Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath. The smile on his face completely disappeared and his voice couldn't help but become louder. "Old Mr. Meow, if you still have such an idea, don't blame me for doing something rude." "You?" Although this old man's talent in alchemy is mediocre, it's not up to a little junior like you to talk to me like this. Hearing Yun Nuoshing's words, a mocking smile appeared on the middle-aged man's face as he sneered. "Let me pinch my fingers and calculate. The white thing in your head might have been dug into a hole by Wang Kai next door. Did he bury something in there?" Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes and suddenly turned around. He waved his hand and was too lazy to talk nonsense with him. He brought the few girls and rushed towards the door. "It's too late for you to leave now." Seeing Yun Nuoshing's actions and hearing those words, a murderous aura flashed across the middle-aged man's face. His feet suddenly stomped on the ground and his body rushed towards Yun Nuoshing like lightning. At the same time his body moved, a rolling heat wave quickly spread in the shop. Wisps of flames spread out from the ground and suddenly sealed the door. Seeing the wall of fire standing in front of him, Yun Nuoshing's face didn't change. He extended his hand and was about to push the door open. "You're courting death." Seeing that Yun Nuoshing was about to touch the wall of fire, the middle-aged man couldn't help but sneer. His flaming hand suddenly slapped out and enveloped the entire passageway. The scarlet flaming palm burned half of the wall and slapped towards Yun Nuoshing and the others from all directions. "Shaoxi!" Yun Nuoshing called out indifferently, after which, the person beside him suddenly flashed. He didn't look behind him and his white-gloved hand gently touched the wall of fire. That gentle action caused the wall of fire to disappear without a trace the moment it touched it. After which, that delicate hand pushed the door open and the sunlight from outside shone in once again. Bang! At the same time, an energy explosion suddenly sounded from behind them. Surging waves of air blew the roof of the shop away. The passageway also disappeared in an instant. Sunlight poured down from above. Seeing this scene, Yun Nuoshing and the rest also gently turned around. Humph, you old bastard. I gave you a lot of face and you didn't want it. You're just a little nether king. Do you think you can overturn the heavens? In the shop, the wooden cabinets were tilted left and right. The walls had collapsed and the medicinal herbs and pills that were placed on the shelves rolled to the side. Papers fluttered in the air and the scene was like an earthquake. The middle-aged man was lying on the ground with a trace of blood hanging from the corner of his mouth. Yi Shi's small foot was stepping on his chest as she looked down at him disdainfully. The aura of death around her formed a small whirlwind. The middle-aged man's eyes widened and he lowered his head with difficulty to look at Yi Shi, who had a cold and arrogant expression on her face. Just now, he hadn't reacted. In his mind, he should have been the one to slap them unconscious. Why did this happen? And this aura, you're a nether king expert. The middle-aged man coughed out a mouthful of blood. The lustful light in his eyes finally disappeared and was replaced by a faint trace of fear. However, he quickly calmed down and roared, I'm an immortal-grade alchemist. If you kill me, the Morning Pill Sacred Hall won't let you off. There won't be a place for you in the Origin Tripod City. You really don't know what's good for you. Your life is in the hands of others and you still have the time to think about other things. Yi Shi sneered and stomped on the middle-aged man's chest. With this stomp, Yun Nuoshing heard the crisp sound of bones breaking. The middle-aged man also spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood was mixed with some fragments of his internal organs. This casual stomp had seriously injured him. Seeing the high and mighty Nether King expert being so casually subdued by Yi Shi, Yun Nuoshing fell into deep thought. Usually, he only faced God Emperor experts. In fact, he didn't really understand people at this level. He thought that even if a Nether King expert couldn't defeat a God Emperor expert, he could at least resist for a short period of time. He didn't expect that he would be killed so quickly. As for why the middle-aged man shouted Nether King, Yun Nuoshing shrugged. He felt that Yi Shi should have shown mercy. Little Shi, let's go. Don't waste time here. Yun Nuoshing called out softly. Yi Shi nodded and lifted her foot to kick the middle-aged man away. The middle-aged man was sent flying and crashed into the wall. He spat out another mouthful of blood. A trace of hatred flashed in his eyes as he stared at the people walking out of the shop. It was as if he wanted to engrave their faces in his mind. Chapter 764. Ignoring the middle-aged man's vicious gaze, Yun Nuoshing indifferently glanced at him before leading his men out of the store. He originally did not want to make a move, but this fellow's thoughts were not right. Furthermore, he had set his sights on the girls behind him. It was already a miracle that he was able to hold back his anger. If he were to make a move, it would not be as simple as destroying a store. That could easily destroy a city or a fortress. Casually tossing a spatial ring in her hand, Yi Shi fiddled with it for a while before casually breaking the spiritual seal on it. She then tossed it to Yun Nuoshing. Here's his spatial storage ring. See if it's inside. Yun Nuoshing nodded his head. His spiritual strength sunk into it. After probing for a moment, he discovered a jade box that was huddled in a corner, emitting a glass-like glow. He took it out and gently opened it. The brilliant glow that shone out caused him to gently nod his head. However, his face twitched slightly before he carelessly closed it again. He scolded, "This old fellow, 50 kilograms? I estimate that there's only 40 kilograms here. It's only enough to make some leftovers." Soon after, he sighed and bitterly smiled. What's wrong with this world? Can't they just do business properly? Why do they have to make a move? Sigh. Yi Shi shrugged her shoulders and said, "A monster king, a godchild, a demigod stage, a demon stage, and a me whose strength he can't see through. Before I reveal my identity, he naturally won't care. After all, that old man is still a Nether King expert. He naturally has his own arrogance and dirty thoughts. Yi Shi jumped into Yun Nuoxing's embrace, swinging her slender legs as she casually said, "Experts naturally have their own arrogance. If Brother Nuoxing wants the other party to talk to you seriously, then show him an identity or strength worthy of the other party's respect. This is the rule of this world. Only experts have the right to speak." "Alright, then let's go take the test to become an alchemist. I don't want to reveal my identity as the Nine Deities Temple. It's too frightening." Yun Nuoxing hugged her gently and said helplessly, "Big Brother Nuo, if you reveal your identity as a member of Nine Deities Hall, the entire Origin Cauldron City will treat you as a guest," Yi Shi added. "That's even worse." Casually strolling through the streets, Yun Nuoxing pondered for a moment before walking into a shop. She also inquired about the alchemist factions in Origin Cauldron City. Second to none is the dazzling fire palace of the Fire God Shrine, followed by the Morning Pill Sacred Hall, and then the Sacred Fire Guild. When the boss mentioned it, he couldn't help but feel a little yearning. That flickering expression of worship made Yun Nuoxing and the others feel a little funny, and also a little emotional. It seemed that the status of an alchemist was indeed not low. In this city where alchemy was common, the alchemist's great power was even more admirable. Recalling the middle-aged man's mention of the Morning Pill Sacred Hall, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but ask, "How strong are the Morning Pill Sacred Hall?" "Very strong. These three factions have always occupied the top 3 positions in Origin Cauldron City. Needless to say, the dazzling Fire Palace is one of the top 3 factions. Neither the Morning Pill Sacred Hall nor the Sacred Fire Guild dares to provoke them. These 2 factions have always had private disputes, but the Sacred Fire Guild has never won against the Morning Pill Sacred Hall." The boss chuckled and said, "It is said that the Morning Pill Sacred Hall has a high-grade saint alchemist. His alchemy efficiency alone is comparable to half of the Sacred Fire Guild's alchemists." The boss said respectfully, "I am an elite alchemist. In Origin Cauldron City, 80% of the people are like me, insignificant alchemists. Don't think that elite alchemists are very famous in other cities. In Origin Cauldron City, elite alchemists are nothing in front of those big shots." After chatting for a while, Yun Nuoxing and the others walked out of the shop. Thinking about the location of the Sacred Fire Guild that they had just inquired about, they walked slowly along a route and turned slowly through a few long streets. It was currently noon, but the streets were still bustling with activity. Many medicinal herbs were displayed on the roadside stalls. There were 100-year-old, 1,000-year-old, and even 10,000-year-old medicinal herbs. They were placed all over the place like cabbages. Some medicinal herbs that were considered precious in the outside world were rarely bought. Only the truly rare and unique treasures would be stored in high-grade jade boxes. After walking around for a long time and asking people along the way, they walked along the walls as if they were walking through a maze for a quarter of an hour. Only then did they slowly come to a stop and raise their heads to look at the majestic building that had suddenly appeared in front of them. The highest point of the palace was like a furnace. 4 huge cauldrons were placed at the 4 corners of the palace, bobbing up and down at the top of the palace. If one looked carefully, they would discover that the space around the cauldrons was slowly fluctuating as they bobbed up and down. One could even hear the sound of heavy weight rubbing against the space. At the top of the palace, on a black plaque, 4 golden words were emitting a faint light. They appeared very imposing, as if they wanted to engrave these 4 words in the minds of those who saw them for the first time. Sacred Fire Guild. Speaking of which, since it's called Sacred Fire, there should be that thing inside, right? That thing. Yun Nuoxing licked her lips and chuckled. "I don't know whether there is or not. I'm just reminding you. With your current situation, even if you refine a divine flame that is ranked lower than 30, it probably won't cause any changes to the divine physique." Before Yi Shi and the others could respond, Ziye's quiet voice entered their minds. Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but smile bitterly. How could a divine flame that was ranked 30th be so easy to find? Not to mention that they had searched the entire God's realm, at least they had seen the treasure map. So far, they had only found the 2 divine flames that were ranked higher in the Sourcepeak region from the complicated symbols. Now, they were still working hard on one of them. I'm just saying. Besides, divine flames aren't very useful to me. Divine weapons can also improve my physique. After repairing the Sword of Sand and absorbing it, it will probably be close to maturity. After that, it will be a matter of realm. Yun Nuoxing smiled indifferently. Ziyi shrugged. She was just reminding him. Besides, what he said was indeed the truth. Divine flames weren't as useful to him as the others. Yun Nuoxing tilted her head and looked at the empty space. She realized that most of the people who passed by this palace would stop for a while and look at the palace with envy or respect. Then, they would also look at her and the girls beside her. A hint of surprise flashed past their eyes. Moreover, they seemed to have absorbed 80% of the gazes that were directed at the Sacred Fire Guild. With a dry cough, Yun Nuoxing helplessly reached out to hold Xian and Feng Er's hands. Then, she glanced at Little Bing Er and Yi Shi. Then, she strode toward the Sacred Fire Guild. As they walked up the stairs and approached the door, 2 young men who seemed to have been watching them for a long time stepped forward and extended their hands to stop them. They smiled faintly and said, "Fairies, this is the territory of the Sacred Fire Guild. Outsiders are not allowed to enter. Is there anything we can help you with?" Yun Nuoxing blinked her bright eyes and glanced at the badges on their chests. The background of the badges was a red sea of fire. A big word Elite was engraved in the middle. There were 3 bright stars in the triangular position. High-level Elite Apothecary. Yun Nuoxing murmured in her heart. Apothecaries and alchemists were of the same rank. Their badges were different, but they were mostly the same. However, she was a little surprised that an elite apothecary was sent to guard the door. It seemed to be just like what the boss said. An elite apothecary didn't seem to be much here. After glancing at them for a while, Yun Nuoxing said softly, "I heard that the Sacred Fire Guild can provide an apothecary rank assessment for ordinary people. I wanted to take a look and test my own rank." "So you want to take a rank assessment? Fairy, do you have your previous rank badge? If you do, we can arrange it for you," the 2 young men said with a smile. They didn't dare to be too casual with their gazes. Those who could move around in Yuan Ding City had a high status. If they weren't strong enough to be unscrupulous, they wouldn't dare to look around casually. Yun Nuoxing shook her head. Just as she was about to say something, she paused. She then took out 2 jade bottles from her ring and placed them in the hands of the 2 young men. She said, "No, we have never done this before. You can arrange it for us." She looked suspiciously at the jade bottle in her hand. Her soul strength entered it casually. Soon after, the young man's body suddenly stiffened. A look of horror quickly surged on his face, but he quickly hid it. He glanced at the person beside him and found that his expression had also trembled slightly. He couldn't help looking at Yun Nuoxing and the others with a hint of respect. "Can we go in now?" Yun Nuoxing asked softly with a smile. The 2 young men trembled and exchanged glances. Soon after, one of them hurriedly cupped his hands towards Yun Nuoxing and said, "Fairy, this way please. We'll make the arrangements for you." After speaking, she glanced at the young man who didn't have time to speak. Under his jealous gaze, she led Yun Nuoxing and the others through the door behind her. After walking through a spacious passageway, they arrived at a large hall. A rich medicinal fragrance lingered in the hall. Just a whiff of it was enough to clear away the fatigue of traveling day and night, making one feel refreshed. There weren't many people in the hall. Only a few people were busy behind their tables. Occasionally, someone would appear, but they would just hurriedly pass by and go somewhere else. It wasn't until a series of light footsteps rang out that those people raised their heads and looked towards the passageway in front of them. When they saw the young man and Yun Nuoxing walking in, a trace of doubt flashed across their eyes. This was especially so when they saw the young man's rather solemn expression, which made them somewhat bewildered. After settling down Yun Nuoshing and the others for a while, the young man walked in front of a person and said, "Senior brother, help me get 2 assessment tokens. The one with no restrictions is the one that can be tested from the beginning all the way up." The senior brother was stunned. He put down the pen in his hand and took out 2 black tokens from his space storage tool. He glanced at the quiet Yun Nuoshing and the others. Her beautiful appearance and ethereal temperament made him swallow his saliva uncontrollably. Before the young man took the 2 tokens, he suddenly stretched out his hand and hooked it around his neck. He smiled and said, "Fandong, you're really something. You were punished to guard the door for 3 days, but you still managed to hook up with such beautiful fairies." The young man called Fandong smiled bitterly. After struggling for a while, he said bitterly, "Hook up my ass. I brought them here to take the alchemist assessment. They've never taken the assessment before, but if nothing unexpected happens, they're at least at the beginning of the immortal grade." Immortal grade? They look like they're only in their late 20s, and they don't have the lethargy of those elders. You're not joking, right? The senior brother's eyebrows twitched slightly, and he suddenly said very seriously, "What's the benefit of lying to you?" Fandong rolled his eyes and took out the jade bottles that Yun Nuoshing had just handed to him. He said, "You'll know when you see it for yourself." The senior brother took the 2 jade bottles suspiciously. Then, he suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air and swallowed his saliva. However, he quickly calmed down and said, "Although we can't rule out the possibility that they didn't refine it themselves, they should have a very strong background since they can take out immortal-grade pills so casually." Fandong nodded and muttered for a while. Then, he took the 2 black tokens and returned to Yun Nuoshing and the others. While they were talking, Yun Nuoshing and Xian were also cramming at the last minute. In fact, they didn't have much experience in alchemy, but why were they so confident? It all started from that time, back then, when they met the Monarch Mountain Empress and saw the statues of Great Emperor Colored Glaze and the others. The Soul Saber Great Emperor was an alchemist. When Yun Nuoshing was cultivating at that time, she inadvertently received some teachings from him. Later, when she met the real person, he also forcibly imparted knowledge to her. "Kid, you have 4 kinds of divine flames. It's simply a waste if you don't learn alchemy. You have to learn it no matter what." At that time, the Soul Saber Great Emperor directly hung Yun Nuoshing up and preached to her. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and at that time, the Empress and the others also agreed very much. She had no choice but to learn. However, the learning time wasn't too long. During that time, there were all kinds of things, but the Soul Saber Great Emperor imparted a lot of his own alchemy experience to Yun Nuoshing. He also let Yun Nuoshing watch him refine pills from the side. It could be considered a serious learning experience. As for how much Yun Nuoshing accepted, it was hard to say. She should have at least half a bucket of knowledge. After all, she boasted that she had no problem learning anything. Therefore, at this time, Yun Nuoshing was also imparting this half a bucket of experience to Xian. As for why she was dragged in, besides her own curiosity, it was more because of her physique. Yun Nuoshing smiled and rubbed Xian's head. When she saw Fandong walking over, she whispered a few words to him. "The 5 elements constitution has the power of creation. This kind of technical work that is similar to creation is very suitable for you." Chapter 765. "Everyone, please come with me." Fandong handed 2 black tokens to Yun Nuoshing and Xian. Then, he gestured to them and smiled. "The black token has the right to take an unlimited test. It's mainly for alchemists who have great strength but have never taken a test before. In fact, if you have the ability, you can directly take the test at the level you think you can reach. There's no need to take multiple tests, but, speaking up to here, Fandong looked back at Yun Nuoshing and the others. The latter nodded helplessly and said, We don't know what level we can reach, so we need to take the test all the way. Fan Dong nodded and then muttered in his heart, if the immortal grade pill was refined by you, you can take the immortal grade test directly. After walking for a while, they stopped in front of a door. Outside the door, there were two young men. They had their hands behind their backs and their backs were as straight as a spear. They were waiting with their eyes closed. Yun Nuoshing's gaze swept across the two young men. Her heart froze. These two young men were both God Son level experts. He didn't lead Yun Nuoshing and the others directly into the door. Instead, he walked towards a small door on the wall. He gently pushed it open and walked in. Behind the small door was a very ordinary room. There was only a counter and a wooden cabinet inside. There were rows of head-sized crystal balls on the cabinet. They were flowing with a faint blue and white light. Fan Dong took out a scroll from the counter and spread it open. He smiled at Yun Nuoshing and said, "Use the crystal ball on the side to measure your age, and say your name." Yun Nuoshing and Xian looked at each other and shrugged helplessly. This was the procedure of others, so there was nothing to dispute. Yusin. It had been a long time since she used an alias. Yun Nuoshing coughed and casually picked up a brighter crystal ball from the counter. She held it in her hands. The blue and white light in the crystal ball circulated for a while. It seemed to rush into Yun Nuoshing's body. Then, it quickly retreated and condensed in the middle of the crystal ball, slowly changing into a number. Uxin, age 10-14? Fan Dong lowered his head and wrote down his name. When he looked up and saw the number on the crystal ball, he was so shocked that his pen fell to the ground. His mouth opened so wide that a pear could be stuffed in. What kind of age is this? My conservative estimate is at least 35. Yun Nuoshing wrinkled her nose and looked at the astonished Fan Dong. She casually revealed her age and asked, This is also relative. The age measured is not the actual age. Fan Dong scratched his head awkwardly. He coughed dryly and said, We cultivators have a very long lifespan. Every time we cultivate, it's almost like we're reborn. However, the age of our bones will be firmly engraved in our bones. That's our actual age. However, this crystal ball measures the age of a cultivator. For example, at our level, our current state is equivalent to our age. Oh, Yun Nuoshing replied. He put down the crystal ball in his hand in disbelief, and took out another one to take a look. In the end, it still showed 14. He didn't know if he was too young or too inexperienced. Yun-yi. Xian also thought of an alias. The dazzling fire palace was here. They didn't want to be caught by the people of the fire god shrine and then worship them. However, this name made Yun Nuoshing blush. She silently glanced at Xian. This name had a deep meaning. Xian took out a crystal ball and Fan Dong also recorded it. Yun-yi, age 10-16. Seeing this age, Fan Dong's cheeks twitched for a while. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. Where did this monster come from? He estimated that she was in her 20s when he measured her. In the end, Yun Nuoshing and Xian were so young that they were almost as young as they were sensible. Especially that Yun-yi, she was much stronger than him. Feng Er and Little Bing Er also curiously held a crystal ball and looked at it attentively for a while. 10 years old and 1 year old. Well, the two of you are young enough. Seeing the age displayed on the crystal ball, Yun Nuoshing's cheeks twitched. In this group of people, one was younger than the other. She also picked up the crystal ball and quickly put it down after a glance. She blushed slightly and turned her head. Then, she saw Yun Nuoshing looking at her with a sinister smile and said, Little she is 20 years old. She blushed and rolled her eyes at him. She smiled bitterly. She clearly looked the youngest, but in the end, she was the oldest. After all, she was a god-emperor powerhouse and had actually lived for more than 100,000 years. Little Xinshin is 2 years younger than me. Xian smiled and rubbed Yun Nuoshing's head. Yun Nuoshing rolled her eyes. In terms of actual age, Xian was 7 or 8 years younger than her. She didn't expect that when the relative age of cultivators was revealed, he would be younger than her. After the registration, Fan Dong led the few people out. Then, he walked to the two young men, cupped his hands and said, "Senior brother, the assessment inside hasn't started yet, right?" "Haha, not yet, but it will start soon. You were punished to guard the door, but you still brought new people. These young ladies are not bad." The senior brother opened his eyes and glanced at Yun Nuoshing and the others. He was stunned and inexplicably felt his heart palpitate when he looked at them. With his strength, he was surprised that he had such a feeling. Fan Dong smiled bitterly and went through the handover procedure with the senior brother. Then, he took the 2 black tokens from Yun Nuoshing and Xian, fiddled with them, and returned them. Then, he smiled at Feng Er and said, "Fairies, please wait here for a moment. Only those who are taking the assessment can enter." Yun Nuoshing and Xian took the tokens, put them away casually, and nodded with a smile. "Good luck." Feng Er smiled and cheered them on. Yun Nuoshing also smiled, and cupped her hands to Fan Dong and the others. Then, she walked through the door with Xian. After entering the door, the bright lights illuminated a spacious platform. In front of them there were 3 doors of different colors. From left to right they were red, blue, and black. A huge crystal hung from the ceiling, illuminating the place. After raising the token and looking at it for a while, Yun Nuoshing pulled Xian to the black door and stuck the token on it. The black door made a slight sound, and then slowly opened from the middle. After the 2 walked in, the door closed suddenly. In the hall behind the black door, there were quite a number of people clustered around. The atmosphere was somewhat cheerful, and whispers could be heard. When Yun Nuoshing and Yun Ruoshing walked in, those people's gazes slowly turned around. Those eyes that contained a bright light glanced at the 2 of them, and then many people were stunned. Yun Nuoshing could not be more familiar with that gaze. Yun Nuoshing was also sizing up these people. His gaze vaguely swept across these people's chests. He was somewhat surprised to find that this group of people basically did not have the alchemist badge. Many of them even appeared to be very young. They did not look much older than them. Clearly, for some reason, they had not participated in the alchemist assessment. In front of the crowd, Yun Nuoshing also found 3 old men. Their eyebrows were almost falling off. On their chests there was a badge with 3 god grade stars, which was the high god grade. The old man in the middle was actually wearing a divine grade beginner badge. He pricked up his ears and listened for a while. Only then did he know that these 3 old men were the elders of the Sacred Fire Guild. The 3 doors where they were at were used for outsiders to assess. Compared to the dazzling Fire Palace and the Morning Pill Holy Hall, the Sacred Fire Guild was very convenient in this aspect. Furthermore, if they found someone with extremely high talent, they would even be accepted into the Sacred Fire Guild as an exception. The 3 old men were still chatting. The divine grade alchemist swept his eyes across the hall and saw the people he didn't see just now. He couldn't help but stare at the 2 young girls who came in without him knowing. He smiled faintly and said, "Haha, 2 little girls, are you also here to take the alchemist assessment?" Yun Nuoshing, who was looking at the hall out of boredom, was slightly stunned when she heard the divine grade old man's words. She then nodded and cupped her hands at the 3 of them. Seeing Yun Nuoshing nod, the divine grade old man was a little surprised. He couldn't help but ask, "Little girl, what's the age on your crystal ball?" "I'm 14 and she's 16. Although Yun Nuoshing didn't know why the divine grade alchemist would ask these questions that had already been registered, she still answered truthfully. Yun Nuoshing's reply caused the old man to be stunned for a moment. Even the 2 old men beside him let out a surprised cry. The people in the hall also turned their gazes in shock and stared at Yun Nuoshing and Yun Nuoshing with strange gazes. All sorts of emotions flashed past their eyes, and almost all of them were puzzled. The divine grade alchemist smiled and didn't say anything else. However, the old man beside him smiled and said, "Old Bai, Your disciple is now close to the advanced supreme grade, right? The divine grade alchemist pondered for a while and sighed. That kid is very talented. He's estimated to have reached the advanced supreme grade at the age of 20. Perhaps he'll be able to advance to the immortal grade in another 2 years. What's wrong? Nothing. I'm just asking. The old man beside him chuckled. His old eyes kept glancing at Yun Nuoshing and Xian. No one knew what he was thinking. Yun Nuoshing and Xian felt uncomfortable when they were glanced at by the old man, but they were relatively calm. The other immortal grade old man was also glancing at the two of them. After a while, he exclaimed in surprise, causing the other two to turn their heads. The immortal grade old man couldn't help but ask, Yi Lin, what are you surprised about? The old man called Yi Lin glanced at him, stroked his beard, and said, I can't see the spiritual realm of these two little girls. Perhaps there will be a good show today. Old Bai, what do you think? Yi Lin looked at the old man in the middle and asked. Let's see. Old Bai chuckled and didn't say anything else. The immortal grade old man rolled his eyes. Time passed slowly for a while. Yun Nuoshing and Xian stood in the corner and didn't go up to talk to anyone. The others stared at them with interest. In the boring wait, two beauties appeared, which was pleasing to the eyes. The two of them didn't bother to pay attention to anything and waited quietly. The black door opened once or twice, and another 2 or 3 people came in. These 2 or 3 people also stood by the side. Their eyes revealed some vicissitudes of life, but they looked very young. Similarly, there were no badges hanging on their chests. After waiting for a while, the divine grade alchemist slowly stood up and waved his hand. Then he smiled and said, Time's up. Let's begin. When the crowd heard the voice, they slowly turned their eyes and looked at the 3 people at the front. Their eyes were filled with seriousness. Some people even took a deep breath, as if they were forcing themselves to be alert. Hearing this, Yi Lin didn't say anything else. He stood up and looked at the crowd below. Tilting his head, his old hand slipped out of his sleeve and pointed at the right side of the hall. There were rooms there. Each person has a single room. How should I say it? That's your examination room. Oh, there are a lot of herbs in each room. When you enter, don't touch them. There's a crystal ball on the table that's used to measure the strength of your soul. It will test your soul more comprehensively and match you with a certain difficulty. Then, you'll be tested 1 level at a time. There's no time limit. When you fail 3 times in a level, it will be considered over. Your level will be fixed at the level above. The initial level of the assessment won't be very high. So, you don't have to worry about failing the first assessment. Don't worry and go ahead. If your talent reaches the standard of our Sacred Fire Guild, the guild's doors will be open for you. Yi Lin's voice wasn't hoarse. Instead, it was a little forceful, causing the people below to look at each other. Their eyes were filled with a strong sense of motivation. The last rule was very attractive to many people, and a portion of the people from the Sacred Fire Guild had also entered through this method. Yi Lin's gaze swept across the crowd. His gaze paused on Yun Nuoshing and Xian for a while. When he saw that the 2 of them were laughing and talking about something, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes and curl his lips into an inexplicable smile. After a while, Yi Lin clapped his hands and shifted his gaze away from Yun Nuoshing. He smiled and said, Okay, let's begin. Don't fail too much. As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd in the hall uniformly walked towards the room on the right. Before entering, some people even cheered each other on. Good luck. Yun Nuoshing and Xian found 2 adjacent rooms. They looked at each other and smiled. Then, they opened the door and walked in. Chapter 766. After the hall became empty, Yi Lin finally sat down unhurriedly. He glanced at Senior Bai, who seemed to be in a good mood, and heard Senior Bai humming a song from who knows how many years ago. Yi Lin could not help but roll his eyes and casually said, You seem to be in a good mood? Haha, it has already begun. Senior White chuckled as he stroked his beard. A glint flashed across his aged eyes as he looked at the tightly shut doors. The originally black doors were now emitting several different colors. Moreover, the soul pressure emitted from the doors that were darker in color was even more powerful. 25 people, 3 of them have reached the divine level soul. 2 of them are divine sons and divine venerables. Only the little girl is at the demon level. Moreover, she is only at the second seal of the demon level. Lao Bai chuckled, causing Yi Lin and the God-grade elder to be stunned. The second seal of the demon level already has a divine level soul? Let's continue to observe, Yi Lin said as he took a sip of tea from the teacup on the table beside him. After the door was closed, the dark room slowly became bright. Yun Nuoxing turned around and looked around. The room was not very big. It was only about 6 meters long and wide. On the side of the door, there was a medicine cabinet made of high-quality jade. Not a single trace of medicine fragrance leaked out. It was sealed very well. In the center of the room, there was a small stone table. On the stone table, there was a 2-meter-tall medicine cauldron and a 2-meter-tall alchemy cauldron. Both of them were made of high-quality materials. When used to refine pills, they could increase the flame and nourish the pills. As for the differences between the medicine cauldron and the alchemy cauldron, there was actually no difference. The 2 types of tools depended on which one was more convenient to use. There were more than 2 types of tools for refining pills. It was just that there were more people using these 2 types of tools. Yun Nuoxing glanced at the 2 alchemy cauldrons and then turned to the side of the stone table. There was a table there. On the table, there was a crystal ball the size of a head. This should be the crystal ball that Yi Lin had mentioned just now to measure the soul strength. Buzz. Walking to the side of the table, Yun Nuoxing stretched out his hand and gently touched the crystal ball. Immediately, a deep multicolored light blossomed from within, illuminating the entire room. The intensity of the light was so strong that Yun Nuoxing could only temporarily close his eyes. At the same time, the power of his soul suddenly surged when he touched the crystal ball. It drilled out from his palm and stuck to the crystal ball, causing him to not dare to let go for a moment. After a long while, when he felt that his soul had gradually calmed down, he released his palm and opened his eyes. The transparent crystal ball was now rendered to look like a piece of colored glass. The crystal ball was silent for a moment, and the light inside flickered slightly. After a moment, a paragraph of text was projected out, and it was reflected in the air. The text was a prescription, and its level and information were completely projected in the air. Premium high grade. It's tested that my soul is at the God level, and it's set at premium high grade. It seems like the starting point isn't high. Yun Nuoxing looked at it seriously. This prescription was a kind of elixir called the Berserk Elixir. The effect of this Berserk Elixir would allow the user to explode with all the power in his body for a short period of time. However, after the effect of the elixir was over, the user would enter a period of weakness due to the excessive outburst of aura. This kind of elixir could be considered as a top-grade elixir among the premium high-grade elixirs. For those who often refined elixirs, the difficulty might not be very high. However, Yun Nuoxing was just a newbie. I wonder how the girl is, muttering in his heart, Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath for a moment. In this room, there wasn't a dragon vein, nor was there an abundance of fire element. If he wanted to refine elixirs, he could only use his own fire element. This was also the first condition for the alchemist examination. Without the fire element, although he could refine elixirs, he definitely couldn't be called an alchemist. The girl's fire origin hasn't been retrieved. I wonder if the weak flames in the 5 elements' energy are enough. While his mind was still wandering, Yun Nuoxing walked to the medicine cabinet at the side and took out the herbs needed to refine the Berserk Elixir. Furthermore, he took out 2 portions at once. He was also worried that this first attempt would be wasted. After all, I'm just a newbie. Although Brother Soul Blade has taught me for a period of time, I'm still inexperienced. I hope that I can use these 2 practices to make up for the gap a little." After arranging the herbs and taking out a jade bottle of good quality, Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly in his heart. Which alchemist grandmaster hadn't been immersed in this field for dozens of years and spent countless efforts? Like the 2 of them, who felt like they were here to play on a whim, it was impossible to make up for the gap between them, no matter how talented they were. "My soul power is definitely sufficient. Then let's go all out." Yun Nuoshing's gaze swept past those medicinal ingredients, then he quietly stared at the prescription. He slowly focused his mind. With his god-level soul's power and the help of the soul-suppressing lamp, he could smash out this high-quality, high-grade elixir. Moreover, he also had the help of the divine flame. Yun Nuoshing repeatedly read the prescription in his mind 7 or 8 times. With a wave of his hand, the purple night flame in his body awakened and surged through his body. Then, it flowed through his palm and into the cauldron. Boom! A violent muffled sound rang out. The faint purple flame violently crashed into the cauldron. The cauldron, which seemed to be of good quality, suddenly shook with a clang. Even the cauldron's lid was shaken. Pft! At the same time, Yi Lin, who was outside the room, took another sip of tea. Before he could swallow the tea, the terrifying flame ripple suddenly spread out and he spat out the tea in his mouth with a "pu" sound. Lao Bai also turned his head in surprise. When he saw Yun Nuoshing's room, his hand, which was stroking his beard, paused. A bright light flashed through his aged eyes. He said faintly, "Faint purple flame. The fluctuation of the divine flame is like a purple moon in the sky. It has a faint star power. If I'm not wrong, it should be the purple night flame, which is ranked 90th on the divine flame list." The immortal alchemist also had a grave expression on his face. Yi Lin awkwardly wiped the tea dripping from his chin and fiercely swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Then, he used his soul power to transmit a message to the outside of the hall. His gaze was fixed on the door that was emitting a colorful light. His gaze penetrated the wall and looked inside. When he saw the faint purple flame flying around Yun Nuoshing's body obediently like a spirit, his expression became even more serious. A moment later, the black door was pushed open. An alchemist hurriedly ran in with a scroll in his hand. He ran to Yi Lin's side. Yi Lin took the scroll and waved his hand. The alchemist withdrew. Then, he unfolded the scroll and saw that it was Yun Nuoshing's information. However, other than the name Yusin, there was nothing else. Yusin? Yi Lin blankly looked at Lao Bai and the immortal alchemist. The latter's white eyebrows twitched slightly as he shook his head. "I've never heard of this name. At least, I've never heard of this name in the Source Cauldron City. I've also never heard of any alchemist in the Source Cauldron City who has a divine flame. This little girl, although she has a divine flame, her technique is very clever, but it's very stiff. She's not used to it, or rather, it's not smooth. Although the process is very smooth, it can't be said to be very coordinated," said the immortal alchemist. "I don't know who her master is, but her technique is very profound. At least, it's not something we can do at our level. It's a pity that she hasn't familiarized herself with it yet. It's like a newbie," said Yi Lin as he nodded. It was not good to judge too early. It was better to continue watching in the room. Yun Nuoshing did not know that the wall was empty, nor did he know that someone had seen him using the purple night dark flame. He was not in the mood to care about what was happening outside. At this moment, there were more than a dozen clumps of medicinal liquid floating in the medicinal cauldron. He was unhurriedly using his soul to take the medicinal ingredients at the side and throw them into the medicinal cauldron. Under the control of his soul power, the light purple flame transformed into a phoenix that swallowed the medicinal ingredients in one gulp. Then, it condensed and extracted the essence of the medicinal ingredients at a frightening speed. Condense. After a long while, when the dozens of medicinal herbs had been completely refined, Yun Nuoxing's hand seal changed. The dozens of medicinal liquids slowly came into contact with one another, fusing into a colorful, fist-sized medicinal liquid. Looking at the changing medicinal liquid, Yun Nuoxing muttered to himself for a while. He left behind a large portion of his soul power to control the purple night dark flame to burn gently. Under the effect of his soul power and the flame, the multicolored medicinal liquid slowly fused into one. Seeing this scene, Yun Nuoxing let out a sigh of relief. Then, he stood up and walked to the side of the cauldron. He took another portion of the berserk pill's medicinal ingredients and started the second cauldron. Strengthening his soul power could speed up the fusion of the medicinal liquid. However, Yun Nuoxing only left behind a portion of his soul power to nourish the medicinal liquid. He did not speed up the fusion of the medicinal liquid. He only allowed it to slowly fuse under the nourishment of his soul power and the flame. Then, he went to start the second cauldron. When he was refining the medicinal essence, he felt that something was wrong. It seemed like there was a problem with his technique. This caused him to want to review it once more so that he would not be flustered in the next test. Outside, Yi Lin and the other two naturally saw this situation. The three of them looked at each other in dismay. Starting the second cauldron was actually quite common. However, wasn't this girl a newbie? They had guessed that she was a newbie. Even if she was taught by a grandmaster, it was impossible for her to start 2 cauldrons on her first try. However, it had already happened. No matter how shocked they were, they could only accept it. Yun Nuoxing, who was immersed in the cauldron, would occasionally open his eyes to look at the situation in the cauldron beside him. After looking for 10 seconds and seeing that nothing was wrong, he continued to immerse himself in refining the medicinal ingredients in the cauldron. This time, the changes in his hand seals were still quite stiff. However, compared to before, it was much better. The entire process also had a sense of natural beauty. If he practiced it a dozen more times, it might become even better. When the second cauldron of medicinal ingredients was finished refining and began to fuse, Yun Nuoxing focused his attention on the cauldron. At this time, the medicinal liquid in the cauldron had already fused and condensed into a perfectly round medicinal pill. It was rolling in the flame. Looking at the color of the medicinal pill, Yun Nuoxing smiled slightly. However, he did not stop. The last step, or perhaps the additional step, was to draw the lines. It was also known as drawing the pill lines. This was similar to a second process. It could increase the quality of the finished medicinal pill. However, if it was a normal pill line, it would not be very useful even if it was drawn. That pill line. How do I draw the pill line? Before he started, Yun Nuoxing's face stiffened. He suddenly forgot how to draw the pill line. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. He quickly recalled the time when he was taught by the Soul Saber Great Emperor. Using the heart as the fire, using the fire as the brush. Every stroke is born from the heart. The heart moves at will, and the mind follows the pill. Only in this way can you draw the pill line that is most suitable for each medicinal pill. The voice of the Soul Saber Great Emperor echoed in his mind. Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath and recalled the medicinal effect of the Berserker pill. Then, his hand seals changed slightly. The surging light purple flame trembled slightly and swallowed the medicinal pill again. He is drawing the pill line. Yi Lin could not help but whisper when he saw this scene. Haha, in order to pursue speed, the current alchemists rarely have the patience to draw the pill line. The time to draw the pill line is enough for some people who have opened 5 cauldrons at once. Only those who pursue the extreme will draw the pill line. Lao Bai smiled and stroked his beard. There seemed to be some gratification in his eyes. As an alchemist, this is how it should be. It took Yun Nuoxing quite a bit of effort to finish drawing the pill veins on the pill. Only then did he relax and let out a laugh. The hand seal dissipated and the light purple flame inside gradually extinguished. With a light flick of his finger, the lid of the medicinal cauldron was shaken. Yun Nuoshing snapped his fingers and a red medicinal pill flew out from the cauldron. After that, it fell into the jade bottle at the side. After keeping it in the jade bottle, Yun Nuoshing ran to the side of the medicinal cauldron. At this time, the medicinal pill inside had been rolling in the flame for an unknown amount of time. This was enough to show that the time needed to draw the pill line was probably longer than the time needed to refine the pill. After drawing the pill line on the second medicinal pill, he extinguished the flame in the medicinal cauldron and kept the medicinal pill. Then, he took the jade bottle of the first medicinal pill and stuck it on the crystal ball. Buzz! When the jade bottle was stuck on the crystal ball, the latter trembled slightly. Very quickly, a line of words was projected into the air. Refinement, low level. Fusion, medium level. Formed pill, medium level. Color, medium level. Overall evaluation, medium level. Because the pill line was drawn, the evaluation increased by 1 grade. Berserker pill, high level. After reading this information, Yun Nuoshing wiped the sweat off his face. This assessment was divided into 6 grades. Low level, medium level, high level, and peak level. This was his first time refining a pill, and he almost made it to the medium level. The medium level was just barely enough. After resting for a while, he stuck the second berserker pill on the crystal ball. Second evaluation, refinement, fusion, formed pill, color, high level. Because the pill line was drawn, the evaluation increased by 1 grade. Berserker pill, high level. Not bad. After rubbing his stiff shoulders, Yun Nuoshing smiled. It seemed that drawing the pill line was still an advantage. This was also a death order given to him by the Soul Saber Great Emperor. He was required to draw the pill line every time he refined a pill. Otherwise, his butt would be smacked into 8 pieces. After a moment, the crystal ball shook slightly. The contents of the prescription changed. Yun Nuoshing also became more alert. Then, he looked at the prescription that changed. His face stiffened and he smiled bitterly. It skipped the supreme level and reached the immortal level. Chapter 767. Tisk Tsk. She went from a novice to a beginner after 2 rounds of refining elixirs. She's almost at the proficient level. She can already use that refining technique very well. Yilin couldn't help but smack his lips. He looked at Yun Nuoshing's room and smiled. The other people in the other rooms are not bad either. The other 2 people with divine level soul have already started to challenge the deity grade. The old man nodded. That child also chose the deity grade prescription. Although her divine level soul and divine flame can make up for some shortcomings, she is too inexperienced. Many situations are more like relying on theory and her own understanding. If it's a familiar prescription, it'll be fine. If it's a strange prescription, it'll be very troublesome for her if it's a difficult one. For example, now White gently pointed his hand over. Yilin and the old man were also stunned. They had started to take the deity grade test. Did they skip the supreme grade directly? But after a while, Yilin and the old man turned their eyes and looked at Yun Nuoshing's room. When they saw the prescription, they couldn't help but touch their foreheads and smile bitterly. Dragon Soul Elixir, Middle Deity Grade. It's one of the most difficult elixirs in the Middle Deity Grade. It's as difficult as the Low Divine Grade. It's a bit harsh. The old man nodded solemnly. If I were to refine it now, the success rate would not be more than 40%. The difficulty lies in the merging of the elixir. You have to merge the elixir with the dragon soul at the end. Even if you know it, it's difficult to control it. White said softly. Then he smiled and said, but I also hope that she can perform a miracle. Yilin also nodded. Suddenly, he looked to the side and saw the room next to Yun Nuoshing's room. He was stunned. That was Xian's room. At this moment, it was emitting rich 5-colored energy, which made him exclaim again. The power of 5 elements. This kind of energy can be used to refine elixirs. TSK. These 2 little girls are not simple. The old man was also surprised. White stroked his beard and looked at Xian's question with his old eyes. He pondered for a while and said, Divine origin pill, low-level immortal grade. Divine sons and godly venerables can directly increase their strength by 1 rank. Why are these 2 children's questions so difficult? The others are comparatively simpler. Even though there are difficulties, they aren't as difficult as they are. That little girl doesn't even have a divine soul. Yi Lin wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and smiled bitterly. It's already hard enough just because they're newbies. There was a hint of helplessness in Yi Lin's voice. Lao Bai and the other 2 also pursed their lips and shrugged their shoulders. The test questions were automatically tested and not set by the 3 of them. Even if they did, it probably wouldn't change much. They wouldn't be biased just because you were a newcomer. Since you came to take the test, you should have the awareness to take the test. But if they succeed, TSK. Compared to the 14-year-old and 16-year-old immortal-grade alchemists, Lao Bai, even your disciple can't compare, right? Yi Lin laughed again. Yes, indeed. Even if he was given the same conditions, he might not be able to reach this level. Maybe it's because of his talent, but also because of his teacher. Look at the techniques used by the 2 girls. I guess they're from the hands of a great grandmaster. White nodded. He didn't mean to be biased towards his disciple. He admitted it very readily, which made Yi Lin scratch his head. Should we check a little? They can't be people from their side, right? The old man raised his eyebrows and said, I don't think so. If they really have such talent, they will definitely be great grandmasters in the future. Why let them take the test? Isn't it better to take the test internally? White shook his head. When the old man heard this, he pondered for a while and nodded. While the 3 of them were conversing, a surging dragon roar was suddenly emitted from Yun Nua's star's room. Soon after, an energy glow blossomed to the extreme. That brilliant light caused the expressions of the 3 of them to harden. Oh no! The furnace is going to explode! Yi Lin shouted. His body shook and almost instantly appeared in front of Yun Nuoxing's door. However, before he could slap the door open, the bright light inside suddenly shrank, and then, boom! A violent explosion suddenly rang out and a terrifying shock wave erupted, sending Yi Lin flying. The entire hall shook violently because of this explosion. The magnitude was so great that even the people in the adjacent rooms could feel it. Everyone's expression trembled as they suspiciously turned their gazes towards the source of the tremor. Their eyes were filled with confusion. Yi Lin had just steadied himself and was about to rush in again, but he saw Lao Bai put a hand on his shoulder and stopped him. Yi Lin was stunned and wanted to say something, but he saw Lao Bai point at the room. Yi Lin looked in the direction of Lao Bai's finger and was stunned. In the room, the human-shaped light shadow did not dissipate. However, the energy fluctuation in the medicine cauldron had disappeared. It seemed that when the cauldron exploded, the elixir had also exploded into ashes. However, what shocked Yi Lin was that Yun Nuoxing was standing there unscathed. She was even scratching her head in distress. There was not even a speck of dust on her body. This. Yi Lin opened his mouth and muttered in disbelief. If we were not prepared when the cauldron exploded, we would have been seriously injured by the explosion. Why is this little girl unscathed? Haha, forget it. It's good that she is fine. White was very calm. He pulled Yi Lin back to the chair. Who didn't have secrets? If he wanted to know everything, he would be exhausted. Look, the little girl is starting to refine again. She was deep in thought for a while and seemed to have some ideas. I just don't know if she can see the fatal point of the dragon soul pill. In the room, Yun Nuoxing tidied up a little. She did not immediately start refining again. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the ground and used her hands to take the 120 herbs. She looked at them one by one. This time, she even opened her evil spirit eye and wanted to see through the herbs. Then, what is the essence of these herbs? Only when they are fused together and neutralized can the elixir be formed. Yun Nuoxing twirled a vine in her hand. The essence in her colorful eyes became even more intense. This pile of herbs is on the strong side, this pile is on the soft side, this pile is on the negative side, this pile is on the positive side, and this pile is on the neutral side. When she looked at the herbs, Yun Nuoxing subconsciously categorized them. Then, she took the last herb. It was a leaf, also known as the dragon soul leaf. It was one of the main ingredients of the dragon soul pill. Although it was a dragon soul, it was actually a herb nurtured by dragon blood. In the entire herb, only that leaf contained the dragon soul. This leaf was also the life of that herb. Once it was taken away, that herb would quickly wither and die. Dragon soul leaf, Yun Nuoxing muttered. That strand of dragon soul was in the process of refining. If it was not handled properly, it would backfire on the alchemist. However, he had a soul contract with Feng, and Little Bing Er. One was one of the 4 divine beasts, and the other was the dragon clan's holy dragon, the dragon clan's king. This allowed him to have their weak aura. This dragon soul was easy to handle and would not hinder him. Let's try again. Sighing, Yun Nuoxing concentrated and once again threw the herbs into the cauldron. Relying on his outstanding soul force and the might of the purple night dark flame, he quickly finished refining the herbs. Pausing for a moment, Yun Nuoxing hesitated for a moment, then nodded. His evil spirit eye suddenly began to operate. Array after array appeared in front of his eyes, surrounding the cauldron 360 degrees, without any blind spots. Only then did he nod his head. Then, he carefully controlled the purple night dark flame. Under the terrifying might of the divine flame, the essences of the various herbs were slowly fused together. Celestial cloud grass, 3 feather leaf, wind ring fruit, no problem. Poria root, green jade lotus, 5 flower buds, no problem either. Looking at the fusion of the various medicinal herbs, Yun Nuoxing slightly relaxed for a second. Then, he focused again. More than 10 formations frantically turned images into information and fed them back to him, allowing him to have complete insight into what was happening inside. He could even see the smallest details of the fusion of the medicinal herbs clearly. Dragon soul leaf. When the dragon soul leaf turned into a green-white liquid and slowly touched the colorful liquid, Yun Nuoxing suddenly frowned. The arrays suddenly expanded and split apart. Shortly after, his face abruptly changed. A dazzling light suddenly burst out from within. That dazzling light was transmitted to his mind through dozens of arrays, almost blinding his eyes. Promptly closing his eyes, the barrier of the divine radiance mirror suddenly expanded. Yun Nuoxing dryly howled as he covered his blinded eyes. Then, rumble! Another earth-shattering explosion shook the entire hall. Yi Lin and the other 2's teacups were shaken and the tea spilled all over the table. The 3 of them looked at each other in dismay, then looked at Yun Nuoxing's room. They couldn't help but sigh. This girl should be fine, right? After the aftermath of the explosion, Yun Nuoxing waited until his eyes weren't so painful before opening his eyes. He smiled bitterly as he rubbed his eyes. That brightness just now had almost blinded him. However, he also saw a problem. When the dragon soul leaf was fused into the medicinal ball, the strand of dragon soul that was originally suppressed suddenly revived and swallowed the entire medicinal ball in one gulp. As a result, the dragon soul leaf that was supposed to be fused into the medicinal ball became the dragon soul leaf that swallowed the medicinal liquid. The latter's medicinal liquid was also resisting with all its might, which was the reason for his failure. Yun Nuoxing frowned and looked at the prescription again. This time, he finally noticed a line of words. He couldn't help but read, Only when the liquid is condensed and then fused can the pill be stabilized. I seem to understand. This time, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but laugh. Soon after, he waved his hand. Not long after, he began the last refinement. However, this time, he threw the dragon soul leaf into a corner of the cauldron and used his flame and spiritual strength to crazily compress it. Seeing him make a move, Lao Bai and the other two smiled knowingly. Lao Bai couldn't help but laugh out loud. It seems like this girl understands the problem. I didn't expect that I would be able to use the array to see the problem in the end. So what if this old man admires you? Yi Lin stroked his beard and laughed heartily. He looked as if he was happier than if he had advanced. He quickly finished refining all the medicinal ingredients and fused them together. However, this time, the dragon soul leaf was like a spectator. It spun at the side and didn't have any intention of fusing with it. Yun Nuoxing also stared intently. If his idea was wrong, then it wouldn't be fun. This test would probably be over. Condense. Yun Nuoxing changed his hand seal and shouted softly. The large ball of colorful liquid began to be compressed by his spiritual strength and flame, speeding up their fusion. The flame surged, and the light purple flame illuminated Yun Nuoxing's trembling hands and beautiful face. A drop of sweat slid down from his forehead, went past his cheek, and fell to his chin. His colorful eyes stared intently, and at this moment, he opened his evil spirit eye to its limit. He observed everything that was happening in the medicine cauldron without missing a single detail. It's now. After a short moment, when the fist-sized ball of medicinal liquid was compressed until only half its size was left, Yun Nuoxing shouted inwardly. His hand seal suddenly changed, and he used his spiritual strength to control the large ball of medicinal liquid to collide with the green and white ball of medicinal liquid. This time, nothing special happened. The wisp of white soul energy didn't move again. It seemed as if it was unwilling, but it also didn't resist. Instead, it watched indifferently as it was engulfed by the large ball of medicinal liquid. Then, it fused with it. Huff! Seeing that the dragon soul leaf had finally fused with it, Yun Nuoxing sat on the ground and gasped for breath. This was really exhausting. His divine-level soul couldn't keep up with the consumption. Yun Nuoxing relaxed a little and gasped for breath for a while. Then, he focused his mind on the medicine cauldron, and the flame became vigorous again. Chapter 768. In the quiet hall, Yi Lin, Lao Bai, and the other two rested on their chairs with their eyes closed as they waited quietly. They did not count how much time had passed, but they felt that at least half a day had passed. At this moment, no one had walked out of the room. The quiet atmosphere was suddenly broken by Yi Lin's sneeze. Lao Bai and the immortal grade alchemist also slowly opened their eyes and glanced at Yi Lin. This made him feel a little embarrassed, and he coughed lightly. Yi Lin yawned and said lazily, "Looks like there are quite a few good seedlings. It's been half a day and they still haven't come out." Lao Bai's old palm rubbed the armrest as he softly said, 10 of them will be stuck at the elite grade, 7 at the low grade, 2 at the elite grade, and 1 at the elite grade. The remaining 5 should be 2 at the quasi-immortal grade, 1 at the intermediate grade, and 2 at the elite grade. Everyone is doing their best. At this moment, no one has the ability to split their attention to do other things. Everyone is fully focused, Yi Lin said. Then, he glanced at the room and could not help but chuckle. Senior White couldn't help but shake his head when he saw Yi Lin secretly laughing about something. However, he didn't say anything else. He sighed softly and glanced at the empty hall before closing his eyes once more and quietly waiting for time to pass. After a long while, when the 3 of them opened their eyes again, a door suddenly trembled slightly. The 3 of them turned their gazes over and stared intently at the door. Soon after, they saw a young man gently push open the door. His delicate and handsome face was somewhat pale and his long hair was messy. He seemed to be in a somewhat sorry state. Seeing the young man walk out, Yi Lin and the other two nodded slightly. Then Yi Lin said, "Elite grade, congratulations on becoming a member of the Yuanding city. You can go to the cultivation room outside to rest. After you are done, someone will give you the badges." The handsome young man held his chest and coughed twice. Then, he respectfully clasped his hands at the three people. Then, he staggered towards the black door. Just as he pushed it open, someone went up to greet him and brought him out. After the young man walked out, another door opened and another young man walked out. His face was as calm as water and his eyes were somewhat gloomy. After the young man walked out, he closed the door behind him. Then, he glanced at Yi Lin and the other two and walked out without saying a word. "I say, great demon, don't tell me you don't intend to get the badge this time?" Seeing the gloomy young man directly walk out, Yi Lin couldn't help but sigh and shake his head. The young man known as the Great Demon stopped in his tracks. He turned around to look at the trio and gently shook his head. "What's the point if I don't return to the peak?" Hearing this, Yi Lin smiled bitterly. "Back then, your soul was damaged and almost crippled. It's good that you're still alive. However, you'll have to start cultivating your soul again. You know how difficult it is when you tried to break through to the high saint grade. Now that you've recovered to the immortal grade, you'll have to take it one step at a time." The great demon sighed and shook his head. Turning around, he pushed open the black door and walked out without saying a word. "This old man is as stubborn as ever." Yi Lin rolled his eyes. White also nodded helplessly. Some time after the great demon came out, the doors to the rooms opened one by one. Figures flashed out one after another and finally stood in the hall. Although they were very tired, they still persevered and straightened their back. They respectfully cupped their hands towards Yi Lin and the other two. Yi Lin repeated what he said just now. These people staggered out of the hall. At this moment they were so tired that they wanted to find a bed to sleep on. Naturally, they didn't want to stay any longer. After these people came out, a few more doors opened. Then, a few people walked out dejectedly. They even swayed a little as they walked. It seemed that they didn't reach the level they expected and were somewhat dispirited. After sending off the last group of people, Yi Lin and the other two looked at the last two doors and frowned. Why aren't the two of them coming out? Creak. When they looked over, the two doors opened at almost the same time. Then, Yun Nuoshing and Xian walked out slowly. Yun Nuoshing even stretched his back. Unlike the two groups of people who left earlier, Yun Nuoshing and Xian didn't look pale at all. Instead, they looked very energetic. Those who didn't know better would think that they were just sleeping. "They're all gone?" Seeing that the hall was empty, Yun Nuoshing scratched his head in shock. Then, he instantly threw this question to the back of his mind. He looked at Xian and smiled. Xian also smiled sweetly. "Little star, what do you think?" "It's okay. I risked my life and forcefully passed the high-level immortal grade exam. After that, I tried 2 more times and consciously gave up." Yun Nuoshing smiled. He almost risked his life to pass the high-level immortal grade exam, and he even had some luck. However, he stubbornly tried the divine grade alchemy, and the result was that he would only be wasting materials if he continued refining. Compared to a 14-year-old high-level immortal grade alchemist, little girl, you've broken a new record. While the two of them were talking, Yi Lin and the other two slowly stood up from their seats and walked to Yun Nuoshing and Xian. Yi Lin said with a smile. Seeing the three of them walking over, Yun Nuoshing also smiled. He cupped his hands and said respectfully, "Master, you must be joking. We were just lucky. In terms of experience, we're still far from them." Hearing Yun Nuoshing's words, Yi Lin and the other two narrowed their eyes. He was so talented at such a young age, but he wasn't arrogant. Instead, he was humble and humble. He was a talent that could be molded. "My name is Yi Lin. This is Bai Ming and Mu Yang. The three of us are the elders of the Sacred Fire Guild in charge of the examination. Yi Lin said with a smile. May I know who your master is? Xian also cupped her hands. Mei Mao looked at the three of them slightly and blinked. Then, she glanced at Yun Nuoxing and laughed in her heart. They weren't really apprenticed, especially her. Yun Nuoxing blinked and thought for a while. However, he shook his head and said, We don't know what his actual name is. We only know that he always carries a saber on his back. That day, he passed by and gave us some advice. Xian couldn't help but laugh in her heart. Yun Nuoxing threw the blame to the Soul Saber Great Emperor and didn't admit that he was her master. A saber? Yi Lin and the other two were stunned and looked at each other. Then, a look of horror flashed across their eyes. They seemed to have thought of something. Looking at their shocked expressions, Yun Nuoxing and Xian couldn't help but be surprised. They didn't expect the Soul Saber Great Emperor's characteristics to be so obvious. They could recognize him just by saying that he carried a saber and was an alchemist. Just as Yun Nuoxing thought, Yi Lin and the other two indeed instantly thought of the Soul Saber Great Emperor. This was because he was extremely well versed in the field of alchemist. His name was deeply engraved in the hearts of many alchemists, and he was almost a legend. Even though he guessed that they might be talking about him, Yi Lin didn't ask in detail. Today, when he saw Yun Nuoxing and Bai Ming's shaky alchemy techniques, he felt that what they said was true. Perhaps the master felt that these two little girls were quite talented and gave them some advice when he passed by. Excuse me. Seeing the three looking at her, Yun Nuoxing called out weakly. Only then did the three look at her. Then, they heard Yun Nuoxing say, Can we receive our badges? Hearing this, Yi Lin smiled and nodded. Of course there's no problem. Wait a moment, I'll get someone to deliver it to you. Given their status, they were top-notch even in Yuanding City. Even dazzling Fire Palace and Morning Pill Sacred Hall wouldn't ignore them. Usually, when they walked outside, anyone who saw them would respectfully greet them. However, the talent and current achievements displayed by the two girls in front of them made them not dare to neglect them. In particular, when they heard that the master behind them might be that person, they became extremely solemn. Their future achievements would definitely be much higher than theirs. Not long after he finished speaking, the black door was pushed open again. Two women walked in respectfully, carefully holding a set of purple gold clothes in their hands. They respectfully handed it to Yun Nuoxing and Yun Nuoxing, and on top of the clothes, there was a high-grade immortal grade badge. This is the clothing of high-grade alchemists in Yuanding City. It's also a symbol of status. Of course, it's not made of ordinary cloth. After wearing it, it can help you maintain a clear state of mind while refining pills. It can also increase the success rate of refining pills, Yi Lin said with a smile. Yun Nuoxing curiously looked at the purple gold robe. It was cool and soft to the touch, just like the touch he felt when he held Xian and Feng Er's little hands. Taking the badge, Yun Nuoxing glanced at it and found that the scarlet flames in the background had turned golden. A large immortal character was engraved on it, and 3 stars arranged in an inverted triangle were extremely bright. Yun Nuoxing secretly glanced at Xian's badge. Then, he was stunned and opened his mouth in astonishment. Xian, who was beside him, saw him stiffen and poked his face in amusement. Then, she waved the badge in her hand and looked at Yun Nuoxing's badge. She smiled and said, Mine is not worse than little stars. Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but smile bitterly. He had risked his life to pass the high-grade immortal grade assessment. He didn't expect Xian to pass as well. Moreover, her conditions were obviously not as good as his. If Xian had the same conditions, she would probably beat him. Little girl, you didn't expect this, right? You're not the best. The high-grade immortal grade pill she refined in the end was even better than the one you refined. Lao Bai couldn't help laughing when he saw Yun Nuoxing's astonished expression. Yun Nuoxing's smile became even more bitter. His God-ranked soul and divine flames couldn't compare to this girl who had nothing. He knew that Xian's 5 elements power was very powerful, but he didn't expect it to be to this extent. Xian couldn't help but smile when she saw his gloomy appearance. She stretched out her hand and gently poked his face, slightly easing his gloomy mood. Yun Nuoxing's mood was slightly complicated and his face was gloomy. He had so many advantages, but he still couldn't compare to Xian, whose conditions weren't as good as his. But at the same time, he was happy and gratified. Naturally, he was happy to see Xian's talent in alchemy. The purple gold robes have a lot of authority in the Origin Cauldron City. They can even get preferential treatment when using the teleportation gate. We won't talk about more, you can experience it for yourself, Yi Lin said with a smile. As for roping them in, they had thought about it, but they didn't have a reason to say it. Not to mention that there might be that person behind Yun Nuoxing and the others, just based on their current grades, their status wouldn't be lower than theirs. Although Yi Lin felt a little regretful that they didn't have a reason to rope them in, he couldn't help but feel a little proud when he thought about how the youngest high-grade immortal-grade alchemist was from their Sacred Fire Guild. Yun Nuoxing casually put away his robes and badge. He didn't intend to change into them now. He then cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Seniors, I have something to ask." "Feel free to speak," Yi Lin nodded with a smile. Seeing Yun Nuoxing's humble appearance, he liked him even more in his heart. Yun Nuoxing pursed his lips and exchanged a glance with Xian. He then fixed his gaze on the trio and said softly, "To be honest, we came from the Origin Cauldron City because we heard that someone here had a piece of mixed yuan iron essence. That's why we came here. We also felt that it would be a little troublesome if we didn't have an identity in the Origin Cauldron City." Mixed yuan iron essence? Yi Lin and the others widened their eyes in astonishment. They then exchanged glances with each other and smiled bitterly. Why did he mention this? Yun Nuoxing scratched his head in confusion when he saw the trio's reaction. Chapter 769. Why did you suddenly bring this up? Yi Lin's expression was a bit unnatural as he looked at Yun Nuoxing bitterly. Yun Nuoxing didn't know why their expressions suddenly changed. She rubbed her palms in confusion and pondered for a while before saying, "Actually, my other master is an advanced blacksmith. He wanted to move his body after a long period of silence, so he asked us to come out and find mixed yuan iron essence and star stones." Hearing this, Yi Lin and the other two nodded in understanding. Mixed yuan iron essence is a unique treasure in the blacksmith's domain that is comparable to a godly material. We don't have such a godly item, but we do know someone who has a piece. I estimate that it's about this big. As Yi Lin spoke, he opened his hands. The area was about the size of a washbasin, which stunned Yun Nuoxing. Her pretty face immediately lit up with joy. "Really? I wonder if Grandmaster Yi can take me there. If we can obtain mixed yuan iron essence, we definitely won't forget about Grandmaster Ye's benefit." Yi Lin and Bai Ming laughed bitterly when they heard this, and then they waved their hands to indicate Chen Shi to calm down before they said, "Don't get too excited too early. Due to certain reasons, we are indeed able to recommend you to him, but it's not convenient for us to speak too much on your behalf. After all, we owe him a favor." Yun Nuoxing nodded. Yi Lin then continued, "So, if you want to exchange for mixed yuan iron essence from him, you have to heat up your wallet." After he finished speaking, Bai Ming also nodded and said, "I'll take these 2 children. You two go deal with the people waiting outside." After Bai Ming finished speaking, he nodded at Yun Nuoxing and Bai Ming, then took the lead and walked out the door. When Yun Nuoxing and Bai Ming saw this, they quickly followed. They were already thinking about what they should use to exchange for the mixed yuan iron essence. Since the other party was acquainted with Elder Bai, it could be said that he was also an alchemist. Of course, it could also be said that he wasn't. However, if he was an alchemist, what grade of materials or medicinal pills would he have to throw out in order to make the other party release the mixed yuan iron essence? After they walked out of the black door, Feng Er, Yi Shi, and the others who were waiting outside quickly stood up. When they saw the two of them walk out, they smiled in their hearts, but they didn't ask anything because Bai Ming was still beside them. Moreover, looking at his solemn expression, it wasn't appropriate for them to say anything. Bai Ming led Yun Nuoxing and the others to the gate of the Sacred Fire Guild, but he was not in a hurry to go out. He found a room and asked Yun Nuoxing and Xian to change into the purple-gold robes. The two did not dawdle and went into the room. After a while, they changed into the purple-gold alchemist robes. Both of them were tall and slender. Yun Nuoxing was also slender and didn't look very muscular. Now that they had changed into the tight-fitting purple and gold robes, their bodies looked even more elongated. Xian was also curiously fiddling with the luxurious robes. Bai Ming smiled softly and nodded his head as he looked at the Yun Nuo star duo, whose ethereal aura had become even more prominent after they had put on the alchemist robes. These two girls were really quite talented. After changing their clothes, Yun Nuoxing and the others followed Bai Ming all the way out of the Sacred Fire Guild and walked straight along the main road. On the main road, some passers-by saw Bai Ming and Yun Nuoxing and the others behind him, and a hint of surprise flashed across their faces. Then, they immediately put on a respectful expression and made a small path on the main road. The originally crowded street also became smooth in an instant. Seeing this scene, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but smack her lip. Many people were envious when they saw the purple-gold robes on his body. This was also a symbol that represented that he was a high-level alchemist. It was just that he didn't realize this. While walking, Yun Nuoxing also told Yun Nuoxing and the others about the assessment and the current situation. When they heard that his alchemy talent seemed to be inferior to Xian's, the three of them couldn't help but laugh. This made Yun Nuoxing's pretty face turn a little red. She couldn't help but mutter, "Anyway, I'm a magic array master. I'll let this girl be in charge of alchemy and whatnot." "That's right." Bai Ming also told Yun Nuoxing and the others about the person they were going to meet. That person's name was Big Demon, but it was just a title. As for his name, they never knew. They just called him Big Demon. He was originally a mid-level saint alchemist, but he failed to break through to the high level. When he was at his weakest, his enemies somehow found out. In the end, his soul exploded and he was almost crippled. Fortunately, he was still alive. However, because his soul was half crippled, he could only cultivate again. Now, he was only at the mid-level of the immortal grade. When we met back then, Bai Ming, Mu Yang, and I all owed him a favor. However, he's a little eccentric. After the accident, he refused to accept our help and didn't like to be disturbed. Therefore, he tried his best to finish the matter in a few words, said Bai Ming. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing smiled. After pondering for a while, she murmured, "His soul was damaged and he had to cultivate again. If you have any medicinal pills or heavenly treasures that can directly repair the soul, he might not even hesitate to exchange with you. Even if he can only recover one grade, it's the same." Bai Ming nodded with a smile. After pondering for a while, Yun Nuoxing gently stroked the two rings on her left hand and nodded solemnly. Seeing that Yun Nuoxing seemed to have a plan, Bai Ming's heart trembled. Could this little girl really have something that can restore the soul? That's right. He has an advanced alchemist and an advanced blacksmith behind him. Since he asked his students to search for items, he should be prepared. Bai Ming also understood when he thought about the advanced blacksmith that Yun Nuoxing had mentioned. After walking for some time, they had unknowingly left the bustling areas and arrived at a small mountain range within Genesis Cauldron City. There were no huge buildings or palaces within a radius of 4 to 5 miles. It was as if they had arrived at the outskirts of the city. After walking around the forest path for a few minutes, a small hut made of neatly built wood suddenly appeared in front of them. Bai Ming led them to the hut and patted the dust off his robes. The environment here is not bad. Yun Nuoxing looked at the wooden hut and scanned the surroundings. He smiled in his heart. It was indeed a good place to live in seclusion. Bai Ming patted the dust off his robes and took a light breath. He raised his hand and patted the door. As soon as his palm touched the wooden door, it opened with a clang. Then, a gloomy voice sounded from inside the hut, "Come in." Hearing this somewhat gloomy voice, Yun Nuoxing also slightly imagined the appearance of the person inside. Very quickly, the appearance of a strange old man appeared, causing his face to tremble. Bai Ming waved his hand and walked into the hut. Yun Nuoxing and the others hurriedly followed behind. The quiet wooden hut was simple and tidy. There was nothing special in it. In the hall on the right they saw a young man with his hands on the windowsill. He was looking out the window, but they didn't know where he was looking. Seeing that the young man's appearance was completely different from the eccentric old man he had imagined, Yun Nuoxing was stunned. He thought that this was just a disciple or son of a great demon. Then, he saw the young man turn around. His handsome face was slightly gloomy. His eyes were hollow and his gaze was sinister. When he saw Yun Nuoxing and Yun Nuoxing, who were wearing purple and gold robes, his eyebrows unconsciously twitched. Then, he said indifferently, "You guys were just there for the assessment." Hearing this voice, Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. He took a light breath and took a step forward. He cupped his hands at the great demon and said respectfully, "Junior UXN greets Senior Great Demon." "Yes, speak frankly." The great demon was a little surprised to see that Yi Shiwen's actions were smooth, and there was no unfamiliarity or reluctance. He even had a respectful expression on his face. When he saw that Xian also cupped his hands at Yi Shiwen, he was even more surprised. His tone also became slightly gentler. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing tilted his head slightly and glanced at Bai Ming. The latter also carefully gave him a look, indicating that he could only help him up to this point. This caused Yun Nuoxing to helplessly nod his head. After a few rounds in his stomach, Yun Nuoxing finally smiled slightly and said, "I heard that the Great Demon Senior is a straightforward person and hates beating around the bush. Therefore, I will get straight to the point. If I have offended you in any way, I hope that the Great Demon Senior can guarantee me." Hearing this, the Great Demon nodded and motioned for him to continue. Yun Nuoxing then continued, "I heard that Senior Great Demon has a piece of mixed yuan iron essence and would like to exchange it with Senior." Just as Yun Nuoxing's voice faded, the big demon's eyes immediately narrowed. The air also abruptly froze, causing Yun Nuoxing and Ziyan's breathing to become sluggish. When they raised their heads, they saw that the big demon's expression seemed to have become even more gloomy. "Ahem." Bai Ming coughed. He didn't expect such a big reaction. But thinking about it, the great demon treated this piece of iron essence as a life-saving straw. He couldn't use it, but he hoped to exchange it for something that could help him recover his soul. Thinking of this, Bai Ming glanced at Yun Nuoxing and sighed in his heart. He hoped that she was really prepared. "This old fellow told you, right?" The great demon put his hands together lightly, then turned around and looked out the window. After pondering for a while, he said, "Since old Bai brought you here, he should have told you about my situation. Then I'll make it clear. This mixed yuan iron essence is my last hope. If you have something that can recover my soul, even if it's only 30%, I'll give it to you." Of course, the great demon knew very well that he wasn't a blacksmith. It was useless to keep a piece of metal for forging. The best choice was to exchange it. His wish was to rush to the level that he had never reached before. Therefore, he needed to recover his half-damaged soul first. These two girls didn't look very old, but they were able to wear the purple and gold robes that represented honor. Obviously, they had some tricks up their sleeve. This gave the great demon some hope. Although this hope was unrealistic, he held on to it tightly. He couldn't be bothered with the fact that the pills that could recover the soul were of high quality. He just held on to this glimmer of hope. Hearing this answer, Yun Nuoshing wasn't surprised. He really did have a way to recover the soul. Moreover, the grade of the pill wasn't just high. It was a low-quality pill. Just looking at it made his chest hurt. However, the mixed yuan iron essence is indeed worth such a pill. If you really want to exchange it, I should be able to take advantage of you. After pondering for a while, Yun Nuoshing raised her head and looked at the great demon's gloomy face with a hint of hope. She smiled and said, I do have a pill to recover the soul. Hearing this, Bai Ming's aged face was filled with surprise. The great demon's heart also violently jumped. Before he could speak, Yun Nuoshing smiled mysteriously and said, I can see that the great demon's body and soul don't seem to fit perfectly. This shouldn't have been obtained through possession. It's more like a reconstructed body. Although this flaw will become smaller as the soul becomes stronger, it will always be there. These words caused the great demon's hand to tremble slightly. He looked at Yun Nuoshing with a strange gaze and frowned. Although he didn't know how Yun Nuoshing had seen through it, it was just as she had said. The great demon knew that his soul wasn't very compatible with the reconstructed body. However, he had no other choice. He could only think of a way in the future. He never thought that this 14-year-old girl would see through it. Even Bai Ming hadn't noticed this. Yun Nuoshing smiled when he saw the change in Lin Dong's expression. He twirled the ring with his finger and tapped it gently. Soon after, a jade bottle popped out and was held in his hand. He gently opened the bottle cap, and a terrifying fluctuation slowly spread out, causing the space to ripple like water. Bai Ming and the great demon were no strangers to this powerful fluctuation. It was the spiritual strength that they were most familiar with. In an instant their eyes widened. Seeing their great reactions, Yun Nuoshing smiled and said, I think it shouldn't be a problem to exchange this for the great demon's mixed yuan iron essence and the method to reconstruct the soul, right? Chapter 770. In Yun Nuoshing's spiritual world, Ziyi, who was bored, was flipping through the nearly 10,000 books in Yun Nuoshing's spiritual world. When she heard this, her hands trembled. She straightened her body and looked at Lan Xian, who was sitting beside her. Kai Xia also turned her head. Mei Mao, who was as bright as the sun, was looking at her with a smile. Lan Xian's heart trembled when she heard this. Of course, they knew why she had said this. When they first met, Yun Nuoshing had said that she wanted to let Lan Xian run in the divine world again. She wanted her to feel the gentle breeze and the hot sun. She wanted her to go to the East Sea and experience the world. However, even Ziyi had never heard of a method to reconstruct the body from the soul. Yun Nua planet did not find such a thing in the treasure trove left behind by Xian Yin. Perhaps there was something behind the restriction, but there was nothing in the place where it appeared now. That's good, Xener. After dozens of eras you can have a body again. Are you happy? Ziyi smiled and poked her smooth forehead. Hearing this, Lan Xian also smiled, but after a while, her face became slightly gloomy, and her smile gradually disappeared. Ziyi and Kai Xia were also stunned. They looked at each other and seemed to understand something, but they didn't say anything. As for Whitey, it was lying on the flaming lotus throne. It raised its head and looked at them. It opened its mouth and yawned. Then, it closed its eyes and turned around to go back to sleep. A terrifying spiritual wave came out of the white jade bottle, causing the ordinary wooden house to tremble slightly. Although the spiritual wave was vast and terrifying, the great demon and Bai Ming opened their eyes wide. If they could get the elixir in the jade bottle, the great demon might be able to recover. The elixir that Yun Nuoshing took out was not the inferior grade elixir that he had estimated. It was a middle grade elixir, which could heal the injuries on the soul and eliminate all the drawbacks of the soul. As for the injuries, it was not an ordinary injury to the soul. Otherwise, this superior grade elixir would be child's play. The great demon stared at the jade bottle, and the light in his eyes became brighter. Although he could not recognize what kind of elixir it was, he knew that if he could consume it and refine it, he might be able to recover to the superior grade immortal level, or even the middle grade divine level. Phew! The great demon heaved a sigh of relief and gradually calmed down. He looked at Yun Nuoshing with a complicated expression. He did not expect that he could take out such an elixir. The grade of the elixir should be the legendary grade. After pondering for a long time, the great demon tilted his head and exchanged glances with Bai Ming. Both of them could see the shock in each other's eyes. The great demon also let out a dry cough. His gaze continued to stare at the jade bottle in Yun Nuoshing's hand. Although his gloomy face was still gloomy, there was an additional trace of gentleness. He smiled and said, "What grade of medicinal pill is this? Master gave it to me. It's a middle grade ice spirit essence elixir. It's used to heal injuries to the soul. Although it can heal external injuries, it's not as effective as healing one's soul." Yun Nuoshing smiled. He kept calling Great Demon as master, but he had pushed all the blame to the Soul Saber Great Emperor. He wondered what the Soul Saber Great Emperor would think if he knew about it. It's this. It's a famous divine medicine even among the extreme grade elixirs. Every time it's concocted, it will consume a large amount of spirit essence. It's extremely harmful to the soul. Not many divine emperor alchemists are willing to concoct it. The great demon and Bai Ming's expression changed. They were astonished and seemed to understand something. Their words made Yun Nuoshing's expression change slightly. He clenched his fist and thought of Xian Yin again. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. "Senior Great Demon, what do you think? Is this ice spirit essence elixir comparable to the mixed yuan iron essence elixir and the method to reconstruct the body?" Yun Nuoshing asked with a smile. The great demon pondered for a while. The great demon pondered for a moment, and a pondering expression flashed across his face. He hesitated for a moment and looked at Bai Ming. After seeing him quietly nod his head, he had some plans in his heart. Originally, if Yun Nuo Planet only wanted the mixed yuan iron essence, he would not hesitate to exchange it. However, if it involved the secret method of his soul reconstruction, he would hesitate. After hesitating for a while, the great demon sighed and rubbed his head. He said, "Little girl, let me tell you in advance. Back then, my soul was almost destroyed by my enemy. Do you know why?" Yun Nuoshing was a little happy when she heard the great demon's words. However, she was a little stunned after hearing his words. She then shook her head. How would she know why the great demon's soul was destroyed? However, just as she shook her head, she was stunned. Yun Nuoshing hesitated for a while and probed. Could it be because of the secret technique to reconstruct the body? Bai Ming also looked at the great demon curiously. He didn't know about this matter. The great demon nodded fiercely and said, "I obtained this secret technique by accident. If I'm not wrong, it should be passed down from a great power in the divine prefecture. As for which power it is, I'm not sure. I didn't stay in the divine prefecture for long. This secret technique seems to be a secret technique that great power doesn't pass down. If they discover that an outsider is practicing it, they will definitely send someone to retrieve it. The fastest way to retrieve it is naturally." When the great demon said this, he waved his hand in front of him, causing the air to turn slightly cold. Yun Nuoshing was stunned. Indeed, when a person died, they would disappear like smoke. Not allowing others to know about it was indeed the best way. "Ha ha!" The great demon suddenly shook his head with a smile and said, "But I'm thinking too much. You have such a powerful master behind you. Even the 9 divine halls have to treat you with respect. How would those people dare to care about you?" When he said this, he even laughed self-deprecatingly. Then, the great demon gently touched the token on his waist. There was a flash of light and an extremely thick, silver-black metal lump the size of a washbasin appeared before him. Upon closer inspection, the metal lump was full of bumps and bumps. Its surface was also uneven. Under the sunlight, there was a ray of silver light flowing through it. After a while, the great demon sighed and took out another page. He placed it gently on the surface of the metal lump and said softly, "This is the secret technique to repair the soul. This secret technique is incomplete. However, the cultivation method can be ignored because this page contains the entire method to reconstruct the body. At first, there will be some inconsistencies. However, as you cultivate or use some medicine to make up for it, this flaw will be erased." Yun Nuoshing stared at the silver-black metal lump that was slowly spinning in front of her. The light that was emitted from it was somewhat dazzling. She could even vaguely feel the metal elements in her body heating up. Yun Nuoshing gently exhaled, a smile hanging on his face. Under the great demon's grinning gaze, Yun Nuoshing gently held the page in his hand. The ice-cold sensation caused Yun Nuoshing's smile to grow even wider. He carefully inspected the remnant page. After confirming that there was no mistake, he finally smiled in satisfaction. He did not expect that he would be able to obtain such an additional reward on this trip. "I can finally help Exhilarating reconstruct her body." Yun Nuoshing heaved a sigh of relief. The promise that she had made for many years could finally be fulfilled. "Haha, Senior Great Demon, this Ice Spirit Divine Essence pill is yours." After putting the 2 items into the pendant solemnly, Yun Nuoshing smiled and took the jade bottle that was hanging by the side. Then, she respectfully handed it to the great demon. Shaking his head with a bitter smile, the great demon excitedly stretched out his hands and received the jade bottle with trembling hands. Then, he took a deep breath and waved at Yun Nuoshing and the rest. Then, he looked at Bai Ming and said, "Old Bai, protect me." "I will now." "Great Demon, you should recuperate first. This matter cannot be rushed." Hearing this, Bai Ming also nodded with a bitter smile. Yun Nuoshing and the rest looked at each other. Then, they cupped their hands at the 2 of them. Knowing how excited the great demon was, they did not stay any longer. They laughed happily in their hearts and quietly walked out of the wooden house. When Bai Ming saw this, he turned around and reminded the great demon. Then, he chased after them and wanted to send Yun Nuoshing off. Yun Nuoshing. Before Yun Nuoshing and the rest left, they stopped when they heard the voice behind them. When they saw Bai Ming walking in front of them, they smiled and cupped their hands together. "Thank you, Senior Bai. If there is anything we can help with in the future, we will definitely lend a hand." Hearing this, Bai Ming waved his hand and smiled. "This time, we have resolved a knot in the great demon's heart. Instead, we owe you a favor." However, even though he said this, he was still quite happy. After knowing about Yun Nuoshing and the rest's talent in alchemy, he wanted to befriend them. As for roping them in, he did not dare to think about it. After chatting for a while, Bai Ming said, "I will stay behind to protect the great demon. I will not send you off." Yun Nuoshing smiled and nodded. "Wish Senior Great Demon good luck for me." "I will." Bai Ming nodded. As if thinking of something, he said, "Oh right, you mentioned the Star Stone before, right?" Hearing this sentence before turning around, Yun Nuoshing was stunned. Then, she nodded and said hopefully, "Senior Bai, do you have a clue?" "Hee, I naturally don't have such a divine object. However, I know where it might appear." Bai Ming smiled and shook his head. Then, he stretched out his withered hand and pointed to the east of Yuan Cauldron City. In the east of Yuan Cauldron City, there is a very large silver-white platform. You will see it when you go there. Occasionally, a Tao origin meeting for alchemists will be held there. To put it bluntly, it is a group of alchemists who will discuss alchemy and exchange their experiences in alchemy. Any alchemist above the supreme grade can participate. However, even if the Tao origin meeting is not held, there will still be people there all day long. Alchemists who have encountered bottlenecks in their cultivation will go there. Those who have encountered problems in alchemy will also go there to discuss with others. Occasionally, there will also be people who will exchange alchemy recipes. It is one of the most important places in Yuan Cauldron City. Bai Ming smiled as he stroked his 1-foot-long beard and said, I'm protecting the great demon. You can tell Yi Lin and Mu Yang about this. They can also bring you there. Okay, thank you Senior Bai. Yun Nuoxing smiled and cupped his hands. He had never heard of this so-called Dao origin meeting. Although they were qualified to participate, it would save them a lot of trouble if they had an experienced guide. As for the white platform that Bai Ming had mentioned, he had seen it before. On the day he had arrived, he had overlooked the entire Yuan Cauldron City from 1,000 miles away. It was a huge white platform that occupied nearly a quarter of the entire Yuan Cauldron City. After informing Bai Ming, Yun Nuoxing left with Xian and the other girls, rapidly flying towards the Sacred Fire Guild. In a short while, they had returned to the guild. After a brief search, he found Yi Lin and Mu Yang and explained the matter to them in detail. Bring you to the Pill Origin platform? No problem, but I have some bad news to inform you. The Dao Origin meeting was held not long ago, and will not be held again in the near future. Yi Lin nodded after hearing Yun Nuoxing's words. However, the information in his words made Yun Nuoxing smile bitterly. They had come at the wrong time. Upon seeing the bitterness on his face, Mu Yang helplessly scratched his beard as he consoled. However, even though the Dao Origin meeting will not be held, the liveliness there will not decrease by much. There will still be many alchemists there. Moreover, from what I know, the one you are looking for will also appear there. Mu Yang smiled. Chapter 771. Origin Cauldron City was a city where almost all of its members were alchemists. In this city, where alchemy was the norm, even life would be closer to alchemy. The Pill Origin platform was a place that was born out of this, occupying nearly a quarter of the area of Origin Cauldron City. The Pill Origin platform was tens of thousands of feet tall and was divided into 4 levels. Not everyone was qualified to step onto the platform, requiring a certain level of strength. From the bottom to the top, they were divided into Elite, Top, Immortal, and Saint. However, if one had a background in Origin Cauldron City, such as Dazzling Flame Palace, Morning Pill Sacred Hall, or Sacred Fire Guild, then even an immortal alchemist could reach the top level. If the younger generation of elite and top-tier alchemists from these 3 forces wanted to go up, they would need to be led by the seniors of their respective forces. In other cases, no matter what background one had, those who trespassed without reaching the required grade would be surrounded and chased away by the guards of each level. In the worst case, they would even be banned from entering the Pill Origin platform. At this time, on the Pill Origin platform, other than the top floor, there were many people on the other 3 platforms. Some people were holding rare or even rare herbs in their hands, discussing with other alchemists what these herbs were, what kind of medicine they could refine, and how to mix them. Others took out a bottle of pills and let people identify the pills just by smelling the pill fragrance. There were also some people who gathered in 2s and 3s to discuss their own alchemy skills, or sit down to set up a stall. So big! It looks much bigger than it looks from the sky. At the bottom of the Pill Origin platform, 6 or 7 people walked out from the street. When they arrived at the bottom, they looked up at the huge silver-white platform that was even taller than the city walls. The colorful-haired girl immediately exclaimed. Every inch of the Alchemy Origin platform was engraved with mysterious patterns, like the totems of birds and beasts. The entire Alchemy Origin platform was densely engraved with these patterns, making it look extremely mysterious. Let's go up first. Yi Lin saw his surprised expression and felt a little satisfied. The Pill Origin platform was the largest and most special area in Origin Cauldron City. who knew how much effort was put into its construction. To be able to receive the praise of an outsider made them feel that the construction was very worthwhile. Yun Nuoshing nodded. After thinking for a while, she exchanged glances with Xian, took out her alchemist badge, and hung it on her chest. She then tidied her purple and gold robe before looking at Yi Lin. Yi Lin chuckled when he saw their solemn expressions. He waved his hand and led them up the stairs. On both sides of the platform's steps there were 2 fully armed guards. Their auras quietly spread out. These guards were actually divine experts. Their eagle-like eyes constantly scanned the people who were ascending the platform. Their focus was the badge on everyone's badge on their chest. If there was nothing important, they wouldn't take action. If there was nothing important, they wouldn't. Their eyes were on the badges. When Yun Nuoshing and the others approached, the 2 guards paid special attention to them. However, when they saw Yi Lin, the 2 guards with solemn expressions cupped their hands towards him. When they saw the badges on Yun Nuoshing and the others' chests, they also bowed towards them. According to the rules of the Pill Origin platform, alchemists of the immortal grade and above could bring their companions in. Therefore, they didn't stop Feng Er and the others and allowed them to follow Yun Nuoshing and Yi Lin up the white platform. After walking up the platform, the quiet atmosphere was instantly thrown away. Noisy and boisterous voices suddenly rushed towards their faces and drilled into their ears. The Pill Origin platform has a formation that blocks out the sounds inside and outside. The alchemists of Origin Cauldron City will come here to discuss the Tao when they have nothing to do. Yi Lin smiled and pointed at a place where a group of people were gathered. Yun Nuoshing turned his gaze and looked in the direction that Yi Lin was pointing at. Then, he saw a group of people talking loudly and passionately about something. Their words were like swords, and the atmosphere was even more hostile. Why does it seem like 2 groups of people are quarreling? The people gathered in a group were even gesticulating and pointing at each other from time to time. Their faces were filled with disdain, and they were arguing until their faces were red. It seemed more like they were quarreling. Don't underestimate the Tao of alchemy. Many alchemists have their doubts solved through this debate and exchange their knowledge of alchemy. Who knows, they might be able to derive new alchemy recipes. Yi Lin laughed and said, "You can go and observe. Who knows, you might be able to gain some insight. With your grades, no one will dare to provoke you." Yi Lin pointed at his chest. Yun Nuoshing suddenly understood. They were currently on the premium platform. With 2 immortal-grade alchemists standing here, it would be very easy for them to attract attention. I'll go take a look at the immortal-grade platform and ask about that person. If you're tired of watching, come up and we'll meet up there. Yi Lin said, then turned around and walked up the platform. Okay. Yun Nuoshing and Yi Lin nodded. Then, they looked at Yi Shi and the others and smiled. They looked left and right, then fixed their eyes on a group of people who were gathered at the side and talking peacefully about something. They slowly walked over. When Yun Nuoshing and the others just walked over, a young-looking person walked forward. He took out an item from his spatial storage device and spread it out on his hand, attracting many people's attention. At first glance, it was a red tree branch that was 1 foot long. The bark on its surface was curled up, but upon closer inspection, one would discover that the surface of the branch was not bark at all. Instead, it was flower petals that were only the size of a pinky nail. They were extremely hard, and even if one were to touch them, the petals would not change. These small flowers were densely packed throughout the entire branch. When one looked at it from afar, it looked like curled tree bark. I saw this medicinal herb in the forest. There aren't many demonic beasts there. When I picked it, there was nothing special. The surrounding weeds grew a foot tall and blocked it. The young man raised the medicinal herb so that everyone could see it more clearly. He said, "Does anyone recognize this medicinal herb?" As soon as he said that, Everyone curiously stretched their necks to take a closer look. However, many people frowned and shook their heads. They could not recognize what medicinal herb it was. Another person took out a thick book and flipped through it. In the end, he could not find it even after a long time. He could only sigh gloomily. I feel like I've seen it somewhere before, but I can't remember where. This branch is shaped like a fiery rock, and it grows deep in the mountains where no one disturbs it. Could it be a rock vine? One person stepped forward, touched his chin, and said hesitantly, Rock vine? When everyone heard this, they looked at him curiously and pondered. Rock vine grows in hard rocks and jumps out from the cracks of the rock. It has the effect of tempering the body and breaking the bones. If it is refined into a pill, it can increase the strength of the body and make the body as hard as a rock. The person continued. No, there is a record in the Medicine Immortals canon. The rock vine stands at the peak of a mountain. It is not frozen even after enduring wind and snow all year round. It uses rocks and snow as its source of life. It hibernates for 1,000 years before breaking out from the rocks. As soon as the person finished speaking, a slightly chubby young man shook his head. He said reasonably and said, Just now, this brother said that the weeds grew a foot long. It is obviously a place of eternal spring. It can't be a rock vine. When the person heard this, his cheeks trembled. He looked at the fatty with some displeasure and said, Then tell me, if this is not a rock vine, what medicinal herb is it? This. The fatty laughed embarrassedly. He scratched his fat face and said, I don't know. TCH, listen to your nonsense. This is a rock vine. If it is not, then tell me what medicinal herb it is. The young man who said it was a rock vine rolled his eyes and pointed at the fatty. He said angrily. The fatty also snorted and crossed his arms. Although I don't know what medicinal herb it is, I have the Medicine Immortals canon as evidence. I can prove that this is not a rock vine. If you are not convinced, I can take it out now. But you insist that this is a rock vine. What evidence do you have? Could it be that you are just guessing? Nonsense. There should be a limit to your nonsense. Bullshit. As the two people refused to accept each other, the young man even rolled up his sleeves and grabbed the fatty's collar. The fatty was not to be outdone. He grabbed the former's wrist and argued with him until his face and ears turned red. When the people beside them heard the words of the two people, they also held their own opinions. Only the young man holding the tree branch stood in the same place in a daze. Seeing that this group of people could not be reasoned with, they started to fight. It did not seem like they were here to discuss the Tao. It seemed like they were here to fight. When Ziyan and Yun Nuoshing saw this, they could not help but burst into laughter. When the surrounding people heard this, they also turned their heads around in shock. When they saw the few little girls gathered together and laughing, their eyes also brightened. The young man who was holding a tree branch could not help but take a few more glances. After which, he coughed dryly and said, Ladies, I don't know what you are laughing about. This is a very serious topic. Don't randomly disturb us. Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing and Zian also slowly stopped laughing. After a dry cough, Yun Nuoshing said, Well, actually I know what this is. Huh. When the young man heard this, he suddenly put down the fatty who was fighting with him and shouted, You know? It is a rock vine, right? Bah. Miss, don't listen to his nonsense. This is definitely not a rock vine. I dare to swear on the Medicine Immortals canon. The fatty also replied, not to be outdone. Seeing that the two of them were about to fight again, Yun Nuoshing was a little embarrassed. She shook her head and said, This is indeed not a rock vine. This is a rock flower branch. It is very similar to a rock vine. When the two are placed together, it is very difficult to distinguish them. The medicinal properties are very mild. Snow-concealing grass, dragon gall fruit, and the rock flower branch can be used to refine a low-level saint-grade body-tempering pill. Yun Nuoshing smiled. Rock flower branch? Low-level Saint grade? Everyone was stunned. The young man who said it was a rock vine was also stunned. He frowned and was about to refute when he saw the badges on Yun Nuoshing and Xian's chests, and their purple-gold robes. He immediately widened his eyes and said, You are a deity-grade alchemist? Hearing his exclamation, everyone also looked at the two people from Yun Nuoshing in shock. Their eyes were slightly dull. Just now they were so focused on arguing that they didn't notice the clothes of the two people. Then, they were a little curious. They didn't know why these two immortal-level masters came to this premium platform. Since the deity-grade alchemist said it was a rock flower branch, it should be right. Yes, it should be a rock flower branch. After seeing their grades, everyone accepted the answer immediately. Yun Nuoshing shook her head helplessly. Then, she looked at the young man who was holding the rock flower branch excitedly and said with a smile, Let me say something. The rock flower branch has been extinct since ancient times. Therefore, although the one in your hand might not be the last one, I guess it should be close to it. Hearing Yun Nuoshing's words, many people's expressions changed slightly. Then, they looked at the young man enviously. The young man also looked at the fiery red branch in his hand in confusion. This was an extinct medicinal herb. No wonder no one could recognize it. Seeing everyone's gaze, Yun Nuoshing shook her head with a smile. She took Xian's hand and looked at Feng and the others. Then, she said with a smile, Let's go up. The girls also smiled and nodded. Then, they followed Yun Nuoshing up the stairs. Along the way, they also looked at the elixir grades in other places. In one place, an old man took out a vague prescription and invited everyone present to complete it together. However, in the end, he did not get what he wanted. There was also a group of people who directly set up their cauldrons to refine elixirs on the spot. They competed in alchemy skills on the spot. As for the winner, it was a young man whose grade was lower than the others. This really shocked everyone present for a while. Yun Nuoshing and the others observed for a while, and felt that there was nothing special. Then, they walked to the third level, the deity grade platform. Chapter 772. Oh, you guys are here. How do you feel? As soon as they stepped onto the platform, Yun Nuoshing saw Yilin standing at the stairs and smiling at them. She couldn't help but smile and say, It's okay. It's more interesting than I thought. When Yilin heard this, he chuckled. Waving his hand, he turned around and walked towards the platform. Come, that fellow has just arrived. Hold on to your purse tightly. Be careful of that fellow's exorbitant demands. Yun Nuoshing shrugged and followed him. Compared to star stones contained much purer and richer power of the stars. It was also a level 12 material, similar to colored glass spiritual sand and mixed yuan iron essence. Although it wasn't labeled as exclusive to gods, it was still a rare treasure of the same level. If Yilin knew what it was, then he would have to take out something valuable. Yun Nuoshing subconsciously touched the 2 rings on her fingers. She rubbed her eyebrows and cheered herself up a little. Then, she quickened her pace and caught up with Yilin. The group of people followed Yilin for a while. Along the way, they stopped at some stalls with some interest. They looked around and bought some prescriptions and herbs. However, these prescriptions were all given to Ziyan by Yun Nuoshing. This girl's talent in alchemy was higher than his. He was depressed for a while and then he recovered. After that, he began to buy continuously. However, the prescriptions on this immortal grade platform were not very high level. Most of them were middle immortal grade. High level ones were somewhat rare. As for saint level ones, it was estimated that they would have to go to the top. A few minutes later, Yilin brought Yun Nuoshing and the others to a place where there weren't many people. Everyone had a mid-level immortal grade or even a high-level badge on their chest. Compared to the entrance and the lower floors, the scene of loud discussions and arguments was nowhere to be seen. Instead, it was just 1 or 2 people clustered together and discussing softly. Occasionally, someone would put his hands together and show a look of understanding. In front of the place where Yi Lin stopped, there were 2 wooden chairs. One of them was already occupied. It was a middle-aged man who looked like he was in his 30s. He was a little slovenly and had stubble around his mouth. At this moment, he was sleeping with his arms crossed and his head tilted back. A trace of saliva dripped from the corner of his mouth, making him look very funny. Yun Nuoxing glanced at Yi Lin and saw the helpless look on his face. It seemed that this person was his target this time, but what was with this posture? Lowering his head to look at the middle-aged man's chest, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but tremble when he saw the mid-level Saint grade badge. There didn't seem to be any peerless alchemists in Yuanding City, and there were only a few high-level and mid-level Saint grade alchemists. These alchemists were already considered the top alchemists in Yuanding City. However, there was a mid-level Saint grade alchemist sleeping soundly in front of him. Moreover, it was an ordinary-looking middle-aged man. Sure enough, one couldn't judge a book by its cover. Elder Kong, wake up. Yi Lin smiled bitterly when he saw that the middle-aged man was still sleeping and tried to wake him up. However, this time, Elder Kong didn't wake up. Yi Lin was a little uncertain. After waiting for a few minutes, he tried again. Following the second call, Yun Nuoxing seemed to notice that Elder Kong's finger trembled slightly. Soon after, a powerful aura slowly rose from the latter's body and spread in all directions. Yun Nuoxing's expression didn't change when he saw this scene. The divine weapon in his body trembled slightly, emitting a weak energy fluctuation that pushed the aura away without affecting them. Yi Lin smiled bitterly, cupped his hands respectfully and said, "Elder Kong, I didn't mean to disturb you. I've come here for an important matter." Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but click his tongue when he saw Yi Lin's respectful appearance. Yi Lin's position in the Sacred Fire Guild was quite high. Even though his hair and beard had already turned white, he still cupped his hands and called a middle-aged man senior. However, based on Elder Kong's rank, he indeed had the qualifications to do so. After Yi Lin spoke, the aura quietly dispersed. Soon after, the middle-aged man on the chair slowly lowered his head and relaxed his crossed hands. His eyes abruptly opened as a sliver of sharp dignity surged within. Yi Lin's eyes stung as he hurriedly lowered his head. "Yi family's boy, what's the matter?" Elder Kong's gaze softened slightly. He glanced at Yi Lin, then at Yun Nuoxing and the others, before speaking in a neutral tone. "Senior, this matter has nothing to do with Senior Yi. I was the one who forced him to bring me here. I hope you don't blame me." Yun Nuoxing took a step forward, cupped his hands towards Elder Kong, and spoke respectfully. Elder Kong took another glance at him when he heard this. His gaze paused on the badge on his chest for a while before slowly turning away. He then looked at Yun Nuoxing's young face and asked, "What's the matter?" Yun Nuoxing gently breathed in, cupped his hands together, and said, "I'll get straight to the point. I heard that Senior Kong has a stellar stone. I want to make a deal with Senior." Elder Kong's thick brows raised as the corners of his mouth curled into an arc. He looked at Yun Nuoxing with a smile that was not a smile and said, "You? What bargaining chip does a god-tier alchemist have to negotiate with me?" Yun Nuoxing could not help but roll her eyes when she heard this. She gently coughed and said, "I know that I don't have enough weight. However, I've not come with my own identity this time. I'm representing my master to make a deal with Senior Kong." "Who's your master?" Elder Kong looked at Yi Lin with interest when he heard this. The Sacred Fire Guild's purple gold robe. This little girl was probably a member of the Sacred Fire Guild. Such a young god-tier alchemist was probably not Yi Lin's. She was probably the personal disciple of some higher-up. "Senior Kong, you may have heard that my master once charged into the demon world alone with a blade. He entered and exited 7 times without suffering a single injury. He was known as the Soul Blade Emperor." Yun Nuoxing dryly coughed with a solemn expression. When this name came out, Elder Kong's hand also trembled. His body suddenly sat up straight, and he looked at Yun Nuoshing with a face of astonishment. Yi Lin's heart was also sweating a little. Although he had previously heard Yun Nuoshing say that his master always carried a blade on his back and had some guesses, he still couldn't help but tremble a little when he confirmed it at this moment. Soul Blade Great Emperor. Other than his astonishing soul blade, his name was also very well known in the alchemist world. Phew! After being shocked for a moment, Elder Kong gently exhaled and looked at Yun Nuoshing with some doubt. He pondered for a moment and said, "Little girl, words alone have no proof. How do I know if your identity is real or fake?" Yun Nuoshing faintly smiled when she heard this. She reached into her bosom and touched the pendant. A white light flashed in her hand, and she took out a palm-sized token. In the middle of the token was a large blade that was as long as a finger. Its shape was exactly the same as the one on the Soul Blade Emperor's back. Yun Nuoshing spread the token out and showed it to the two of them. Then, she smiled and said, "I wonder if this can prove my identity?" Elder Kong and Yi Lin's eyes were unusually solemn when they saw the familiar symbol that they had seen countless times in books appear before their eyes. The contempt in the former's eyes was restrained by a lot. He secretly glanced at Yi Lin from the corner of his eyes. When he saw that Yi Lin was similarly astonished and did not seem to know anything, his heart slowly calmed down. Yun Nuoshing secretly laughed in her heart when she saw the appearance of the two of them. Besides the Soul Blade Emperor's token, there were 5 other tokens in the pendant. They were forced to her by the Empress and the others. Yun Nuoshing did not expect that they would come in handy at this moment. After a long while, Elder Kong took a deep breath and raised his head to look at Yun Nuoshing. When he saw her looking at him with a smile, he was silent for a moment. Then, he slapped his thigh and said, "Of course there's no problem. May I know your name?" "My name is Yu Xen. Master has asked us to search for forging materials. I hope that Senior can make an exception." Yun Nuoshing cupped her hands respectfully. When she heard that Elder Kong had changed the way he addressed her, she could not help but secretly laugh. Sometimes, with some status, it was indeed much easier to talk to. "Yes, of course there's no problem. However, even if you are the Soul Blade Emperor's student, you still have to act according to my rules. I can give you this star stone, but I need information that is worthy of its value." Elder Kong gently rubbed his hands together and said, "Information." Yun Nuoshing was stunned. He had thought of many things, but he did not expect that Elder Kong would give him such a condition. This caused him to be a little dumbfounded. Yi Shi and the others were also stunned. They looked at each other and then scratched their heads in distress. What kind of condition is this? Not exchanging anything but information? Yes, information. As long as I don't know about it, it's fine no matter what information it is. For example, where medicinal herbs are, where medicinal herbs will appear, where there are ruins and secret realms that even beginner god-level experts can go to, and some special places. Although everything in the world had a price, how should the price of information be marked? What kind of information was worthy of a 12th grade rare treasure? Yun Nuoshing was also a little distressed. He still had many things on him. If he used those things to exchange, he did not feel that there would be any problem. At most, he would have to pay a heavy price. In fact, he was already prepared for this. However, he never expected that Elder Kong's condition would be information. Should he tell him the location of a divine flame? Elder Kong was not in a hurry when he saw the expressions of Yun Nuoshing and the others constantly changing. He sat on the chair and tapped his fingers lightly, quietly waiting for Yun Nuoshing to speak. Yun Nuoshing thought for a moment, and then his eyes spun before he coughed dryly and said, "Senior, have you heard of any ruins appearing in the Ganyuan region recently?" Elder Kong's fingers that were tapping repeatedly stopped, and then he raised his head to glance at Yun Nuoshing. He pondered for a moment before he shook his head. Ahem. Yun Nuoshing was slightly unable to make an estimate when he saw this, and he thought for a moment before he said, I wonder if the information about the ruins of an ancient city from the Dark Era can be exchanged for that starstone? There are many god-level powerhouses buried in the ruins. The ruins of an ancient city from the Dark Era. Elder Kong pondered deeply when he heard this, and his heart shook fiercely, especially when he heard the words God. However, he didn't make a decision right away. Not everything was in the ruins, and not every ruin would leave behind something special. If these ruins were unable to provide him with the slightest bit of help, then this trade would be a loss. In reality, exchanging information like this was a gamble as well. If he was able to obtain benefits from this information, then it would be a joyous matter for everyone, and if he wasn't able to obtain anything, then he could only sigh at his own misfortune. Yun Nuoshing continued, Actually, this matter happened not too long ago, but it just happened to be beside a large city. When we left, only a portion of people were preparing to set off. However, it will reach here sooner or later, so I should think of something else. Elder Kong's face twitched when he heard this. This was a living temptation. If he found out at this moment, then he would still be a step ahead of many people, but if he waited for the news to reach here, then there would probably be nothing left of him. All right, I'll take this. Tell me. Elder Kong nodded, and his eyes were filled with anticipation as he looked at Yun Nuoshing. Yun Nuoshing coughed dryly and said, Senior Kong, let me take a look at the starstone first. I'm right here, and I won't be able to escape. Elder Kong rolled his eyes. Without any delay, he waved his hand and took out a huge boulder that was more than 10 feet tall. He placed it heavily on the ground, snorted softly, and urged, Tell me quickly. Yun Nuoshing glanced at the huge boulder. The surface of the pitch-black star domain was no different from the starstone, but the difference was that the surface of the starstone was a static star domain, while the starstone's star domain was flowing. If one took a closer look, they would be able to see many golden lines flickering and flowing inside. Actually, if you had held on for a little longer, I would have used the information of the divine flame to exchange for it. Yun Nuoshing muttered in his heart, then looked at Elder Kong with a smile. He knew that the latter was probably doing this for the sake of the Soul Saber Great Emperor. If it was someone else, he would probably drag on for a little longer. The truth was just as Yun Nuoshing expected. Elder Kong felt that this condition was still too unrealistic as there were too many unknown factors. However, the former was related to the Soul Saber Great Emperor, so he had no choice but to give him face. As for the rest, it would depend on his luck and whether he could obtain anything special. After telling Yun Nuoshing about the Sky Fantasy Mountain Range, Elder Kong casually gestured. Yun Nuoshing smiled and took away the starstone. If it was in the hands of a blacksmith, the difficulty of exchanging this level 12 material would not be much lower than forging a divine weapon. It was also because it would not be of much use in the hands of an alchemist, so those alchemists could only exchange it for other things. This made the process much simpler. Yun Nuoshing violently heaved a sigh of relief after keeping the last piece of unique treasure he had obtained. He then explained the matters of the ancient city to Elder Kong in detail. There were many places that he had not explored. Therefore, the value of this information was not very great. It was only useful for the latter to know about it. However, Elder Kong was already satisfied with this. After packing up a little, he flew towards the city gate. His impatient manner caused Yi Lin to smile bitterly. As he watched Elder Kong vanish from his field of vision, Yun Nuoshing stretched his body and said to Yi Lin with a smile, Thank you, Senior Yi. All three of you have helped me greatly this time. You were assessed from the Sacred Fire Guild. This little authority is not a problem for you. Yi Lin smiled and waved his hand. Although he said that he did not mind, he was actually very happy. This was actually an indirect favor to the Soul Saber Great Emperor. If he knew, he would know that this was not just a favor from the Soul Saber Great Emperor, but also a favor from the Nine Divine Hall. Oh no, let's go. After finishing, Yun Nuoshing originally wanted to stroll around. However, when he glanced to the side, he inadvertently saw a person. His expression slightly changed as he hurriedly informed Yilin. Then, he pulled Ziyen and the other girls and quickly disappeared from this place. Yilin also followed in confusion. After they were a distance away, they hurriedly went down from the Alchemy Origin platform. After leaving the Alchemy Origin platform, Yun Nuoshing heaved a sigh of relief. I almost bumped into that guy. After confirming that it was safe, Yun Nuoshing heaved a sigh of relief. He looked at the Alchemy Origin platform behind him with lingering fear. What happened? Who did you offend? Yilin asked. Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly and told him what happened when they were looking for the colored glaze spiritual sand. After hearing the middle-aged man's name, Yilin could not help but be speechless. He smiled bitterly and said, that old man Miao Pu's position in the Morning Pill Sacred Hall is equivalent to the three of us. You were right to hide quickly. That guy's talent is average. His current rank is piled up with time. He's already an expert of the underworld king realm, but he can't break through to the divine level. He's also lustful. Many people have already dared to chase after him. I just saw him with a large group of people. It seems like he's looking for someone. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's better to leave quickly. Yun Nuoshing wiped the sweat from his forehead and shook his head. He said, we've got the 3 heavenly treasures. It's time for us to leave. We don't have much time left. Okay, then I wish you a safe journey. If you have time, come back and chat with us. If you need anything, just let us know. As an alchemist, there will always be a time when you need herbs. Yilin stroked his beard and nodded with a smile. Yun Nuoshing also smiled and said a few more words. Then, he led Zian and the other girls away from Yilin and walked towards the city. Chapter 773. After separating from Yilin, Yun Nuoshing wasn't in a hurry to leave for the city gate. Instead, he asked someone about the location of the dazzling fire palace and rushed there without stopping. The 2 heavenly treasures were thanks to the Sacred Fire Guild. To be more precise, it was thanks to Yilin and Bai Ming. Yun Nuoshing also wanted to settle this matter before leaving. With his schedule, he wouldn't return unless something happened. Therefore, it was better to settle this matter immediately. Holding the 9 shrine medallion, he rushed into the dazzling fire palace. The arrival of Yun Nuoshing's group naturally caused a commotion. Just as Jin Huan said, the faces of Yun Nuoshing's group were spread to all the subordinate forces of the 9 shrine. This was very useful at times. As long as they didn't conceal themselves, it was very easy to recognize them. However, there were also times when they concealed themselves, such as their shiny long hair. Although the person in charge of the dazzling fire palace repeatedly said that he didn't need Yun Nuoshing's remuneration, he still stayed behind and inquired about the location of the elemental plane. Only then did he pull Zian and the other girls and soar into the sky. No, he directly left the dazzling fire palace through the array of the dazzling fire palace. Following the departure of Yun Nuoshing's group from the dazzling fire palace, the short story that had happened in the dazzling fire palace had also come to an end. Although he couldn't personally witness what kind of storm the words he left behind would cause in the dazzling fire palace, he could more or less guess what had happened. In any case, the Morning Pill Sacred Hall would be suppressed by the dazzling fire palace to the point of being unable to breathe. That Miao Pu would also never be able to guess what had happened. The incident at Origin Cauldron City was just a small interlude. They stayed there for more than 2 days. Yun Nuoshing was practically running at full speed with the light element. She didn't directly use light speed, but increased her speed by a lot. She didn't even bother to rest when passing by some small cities. After flying in the sky for an entire day, They finally slowed down when they were very close to the elemental plains. Not far away they happened to see a city. It was so coincidental that Yun Nuoxing was dumbfounded. It's not a coincidence. I asked Su Ming to adjust the route and come here. Yi Shi raised her head and glanced at Yun Nuoxing as she spoke unhurriedly. Then, she lowered her head and ate the large pile of food that little Bing heir had bought. What's wrong with this city? Yun Nuoxing sat down in confusion. He didn't ask Su Ming to change the route. He only looked at Yi Shi with his multicolored eyes. Since she wanted to come here, she should have something to do. After eating a bun, Yi Shi stared blankly for a moment. She raised her small face and looked at the horizon with her wine-red eyes. A trace of reminiscence and some sadness flashed through her eyes. After a while, she said in a small voice, There's something. Although he didn't know what she was thinking, Yun Nuoxing clearly saw the sadness in her eyes. However, he didn't know what to say. To be honest, he didn't know much about her. Yi Shi rarely talked about her life, so they had no way of knowing. We'll accompany you. Yun Nuoxing smiled and rubbed her hair. Although he didn't know, it didn't matter. Yi Shi looked at him, smiled gently, and nodded. Stardust City. Rumor had it that before the city was built, a broken star turned into a fireball and fell on the city. It burned everything within 1,000,000 miles, leaving not even a blade of grass. No one knew how many years had passed before the city regained its vitality. People who had seen that scene built a city here and remembered the name. Every city is a miniature version of the world. Countless people live their lives here. Happiness, anger, sorrow, joy, separation, and reunion. Stardust City, Stardust, the fragments of the stars. What a good name. This city also has its most unique story. Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but laugh out loud as he looked at the huge city that spanned more than 300,000 miles from the sky. She seemed to be affected by his laughter, and the sadness in Yi Shi's big eyes was diluted. She smiled slightly and said, Stardust City has a star descent ceremony. It's held once a year by the only school in the city. The ceremony is held for every child who has reached the age of 14. A portion of the star's fate will be divided and will descend on those children. Haha, but this ceremony doesn't have much effect now. The Stardust City's Master of Star Dust passed away and didn't leave behind the exact details of the star descent ceremony. Later generations can't imitate it perfectly. Star Descent Ceremony. The Stardust Master was also very gentle. Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but sigh when he heard this. Yi Shi was stunned. She looked at him and asked in confusion, Why do you say that? Yun Nuoxing smiled and rubbed her little head. He turned around and saw that Xian and the others were also looking at him curiously. He couldn't help but smile and said, Seizing the star's fate is the Stardust Master's unique method. However, no matter how high one's cultivation is, if one uses this method before reaching the divine level, he will definitely be suppressed by the world. To be more specific, it will be the suppression of the world's rules. The star's fate that will descend on those children will be replenished by the Stardust Master himself or even the people around him. In other words, the Stardust Master is using the Stardust Master's own fate in exchange for the star's fate to descend on others. Of course, the relationship between the two is definitely not equal. A person's fate can't be divided so much. If one loses their own fate, they will encounter many strange things. The most obvious is probably the change in fate. Of course, if one doesn't do something too heaven-defying, their fate won't change. Changing one's fate probably doesn't count. Just pretend I didn't say that, Yun Nuoxing explained with a smile. Brother Nua, how do you know this? Yi Shi asked curiously. She had heard this before, but she didn't know much about it. Yun Nuoxing smiled and took out a yellowed book from her pendant. An ancient and dusty aura spread out from it. It was the heavenly evolution technique that she obtained from the great mountain emperor's palace. Heavenly evolution technique is the general outline of the Great Fate deduction technique. Don't think that it's just a thin book. It actually has more than 200 pages. Many things rely on comprehension. I can only understand a little now, but I understand a lot about fate, Yun Nuoshing said as she gently flipped open the heavenly evolution technique. She suddenly exclaimed softly when she looked at the ancient book that Yun Nuoshing was flipping through, causing Yun Nuoshing's hand to stop flipping through the ancient book. I think I've seen this symbol before, she said with uncertainty as she suspiciously stretched out her small hand and pointed at a profound symbol in the ancient book. You've seen it before? Where is it? Is it a book? Yun Nuoshing blinked and quickly asked. It's not a book. It's on a building, an ancient building. It just so happens that it's in this star-dust city. I'll bring Brother Nuo to take a look later. She shook her head and said. A building? Yun Nuoshing was puzzled, but she didn't ask anything at this time. She would understand when she went to take a look. After a while, they landed on the ground. The group entered the city peacefully. However, before entering the city, they were interrogated by the soldiers for a while. They also had to register their names before entering the city. Yun Yi, Yun Feng, Yun Bing Er. Why are you all using my surname? After entering the city, Yun Nuoshing looked at the girls behind him speechlessly and rolled his eyes. When they were registering, each of them used an alias. Moreover, when he heard the names, he felt that there was something wrong. Others would know as soon as they heard it. Well, this group was from the Yun family. Fortunately, he didn't use his real name. Otherwise, Shi would probably use a name with the surname Yun, making it seem like a big family was traveling. Don't mind these details, Xian said with a smile as she raised a jade finger in front of her red lips. Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes. This girl had been led astray by him. She was such a good girl in the past, although she didn't say that she had become bad now. Brother Nuo, why don't we just form a Yun family? Brother Nuo will be the head of the family, and I'll be an elder for fun, she said with a smile. Well, there are 5 people in this family. Including the 4 in the head, there will be 9 people. Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes. She led Yun Nuoshing and the others around the city. After a while, they left the tall buildings and seemed to have arrived in front of a small village. However, what appeared in front of them made Yun Nuoshing and the others stunned. This was the edge of Star-Dust City. It was a small village built against the mountain, covering an area of 100 miles. It wasn't hard to imagine that this place used to be prosperous and peaceful, but now it had disappeared under the barrier of a magical array. This was a dilapidated land. Decayed houses had collapsed, and thick tree roots had pierced through the walls, occupying the space of the houses. The fields were overgrown with weeds, and the river was dry. Some of the magical arrays that were used to support the crops were also damaged and abandoned. Half of the arched bridge on the river had collapsed, broken down from the middle, and rocks were scattered all over the ground. The statue at the entrance of the village was only left with the lower half, and it was covered in green vines. She quickened her pace and stood in front of the arched bridge at the entrance of the village. She turned around and smiled at Yun Nuoshing and the others. She pressed her hands on her knees and bowed slightly. She smiled and said, "Guests from afar, welcome to the Xian family village. Please allow me to be a good host and treat you well." Yun Nuoshing and the others' hearts skipped a beat. So this dilapidated land was where she used to live? It was the village where she lived in her first life when she was still called Shinran. The bright sunlight passed through the barrier of the magical array and spilled in. Yun Nuoshing saw a drop of hot tear in Yishi's wine-red eyes. It was very beautiful, but it was a little desolate. It was heartbreaking to look at. The small mountain beside the village wasn't very tall. It was only 100 meters high, but it was a few hundred meters long. Yishi brought Yun Nuoshing and the others around the village for a while, and then they walked up the mountain. When they looked back from halfway up the mountain, they could see that the entire village was hidden in layers within the forest. It was accompanied by the greenery, and if they didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to see a single house. Pushing aside the overgrown weeds, pushing away the fallen branches, and going around the big trees, Yun Nuoshing and the others carefully followed behind Yi Shi. After a while, they went around a big tree, and what appeared in front of them was an open space in the slanted grassland. From top to bottom, tombstones were displayed. It looked like no one had taken care of it for a long time. The weeds stretched and covered some of the tombstones. Yi Shi walked to the 2 tombstones at the very bottom and knelt down lightly. Her face was slightly red, and she slowly put her hands together. Her eyes were misty as she muttered to herself, "Fellow villagers, father, mother, little Ran has brought people to see you." This was the graveyard of the Xian family village, but it wasn't because there were only cenotaphs here. Only a few relics were buried here. Some of them didn't even have anything, just a tombstone with a name engraved on it. Yun Nuoshing, Xian, and the others tiptoed to Yi Shi's side. They looked at each other for a while, then nodded. Then, they put their hands together and bowed gently. Yun Nuoshing wanted to say something, but he didn't know how to organize his words. He wanted to speak a few times, but when he saw Yi Shi's sad expression, he closed his mouth again. He couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. He should have said something at this time. Yi Shi knew that Yun Nuoshing wasn't good with words at this critical moment, so she didn't let him say anything. She knew that he was silently praying in his heart. She was satisfied that he was willing to come and pay his respects. "Should I kneel down?" Yun Nuoshing finally couldn't help but ask Yi Shi telepathically. Yi Shi, who had been mumbling in her heart, suddenly choked on her words. She forgot what she was thinking and rolled her eyes. Then, she replied to Yun Nuoshing telepathically, "Brother Nuo, if you want to go through the wedding ceremony with me, it's not impossible for you to kneel down." Yun Nuoshing's pretty face turned red. He coughed dryly and rolled his eyes. Yi Shi's little face also turned slightly red, but it was normal. After Yun Nuoshing and the others paid their respects, they whispered to each other for a while. Then, they quietly left, leaving a small space for Yi Shi to talk to her parent. After an hour, when the sun hung high in the sky, Yi Shi slowly got up and patted the grass on her calves. Seeing Yi Shi walk over with a sad face, Yun Nuoshing didn't know what to say. Perhaps it was because his body was more direct. He also used his own way of comforting people. He gently picked Yi Shi up and held her in his arms. He gently patted her back and opened his mouth, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Xian also walked forward and rubbed Yi Shi's head. Just as he was about to speak, Yi Shi said helplessly, "All right, I'm already a few 100,000 years old. I won't be unable to get over it. At least let me reminisce for a while." Yun Nuoshing thought for a while, then patted her back and said, "You can cry. I don't mind." "I mind. If I cry, I'll be laughed at by all of you." Yi Shi rolled her eyes. She wrapped her little arms around Yun Nuoshing's neck and used a bit of force to press her entire body against his chest. Her wine-red eyes were slightly red as she stared in front of her. Chapter 774. When I became the Emperor of the Underworld, I came back once. At that time, the Xian family village was as ruined as it is now. The people of Stardust City wanted to rebuild this piece of land, but I blocked them all and sealed it with a spell formation. It's still here today. In the end, I couldn't find a way to remove the curse. I only knew that there was a way to remove it after I became a god, but I also lost the reason to look for it. I don't know what happened in the long time I was away, and I don't know who destroyed it. When I came back, I only saw a mess and bones all over the place. More than that, I couldn't find anyone. I wanted to ask for an explanation, but I couldn't find anyone. Yi Shi sighed and talked endlessly as they strolled through the dilapidated village. Yun Nuoshing couldn't say anything. He only gently stroked her hair and comforted her silently. After walking around the dilapidated village, they returned to a large tree in the middle of the village. She looked at the huge tree, lowered her head and sighed. She said, "Let's go. After leaving this time, I probably won't be back for a long time. The Shinran of the past should have been buried with the passing of that day. The one standing here now is Shi. Don't force yourself to forget the past. It's still a part of you now," Yun Nuoshing said softly as he pulled her into his arms. Shi was stunned. Her bright eyes flickered for a moment. After a while, she nodded and smiled. "Yes, that's true. I was thinking too much." Yun Nuoshing smiled and stood up with her in his arms. He walked to Xian's side and looked back at the huge tree. After a long time, he walked towards the entrance of the village. Rustle, they had just taken 2 steps when the soft sound of leaves rustling attracted their attention. Shi's expression changed. She quickly turned around and looked in the direction of the sound in confusion. Seeing her widen her eyes in confusion, Yun Nuoshing also narrowed his eyes. He waved his hand and took out the Netherworld Ruin sword. Then, he placed Shi in Xian's arms and walked lightly towards the bush. Yun Nuoshing walked to the bush vigilantly, but she was stunned. She sniffed and said, "It smells like blood." When Shi and the others heard this, their expressions changed. Shi directly jumped down and quickly held a formation in her hand as she vigilantly watched. Yun Nuoshing waved his hand. His wood element could sense a very weak aura behind it. It was so weak that it could stop breathing. He didn't think too much about it. He reached out and pushed the bushes aside. He looked around for a while and saw a white ball. It was flat and lying on the ground. It was only half the size of his head. He carefully wrapped his hand with the wood element and carried it out. He jogged back to Shi and the others. Then, he revealed the ball in his arms. The little thing had many wounds on its body. Its flesh was badly mangled. It seemed to have been seriously injured. Even its breathing was very weak. Feng Er sniffed with her little nose. Mei Mao's eyes flashed. Little Bing Er also had some reaction. The two's reactions were similar to the feeling when they met someone of the same race. They sniffed and recognized the race. Of course, the same race here referred to the fact that they were all demons and not the same species. Feng Er stretched out her slender hand and gently touched the soft white ball in Yun Nuoshing's hand. She rubbed it for a while and pulled out 6 white tails. She immediately understood something and said, "Six-tailed dark cloud immortal fox." Yun Nuoshing was also stunned. Sister Anne's family? Feng Er rolled her eyes at him. Why did he randomly point at relatives? Unlashin's original form is a dark cloud fairy. It is also a rare species in the fox race. The number of dark cloud immortals is even fewer than that of dark cloud fairy, and they are more rare. If there is no accident, they can evolve into divine beasts. Moreover, they can only have 6 tails at most. 6 tails is the best. So it's still a fox. Holding the white ball in his hand, Yun Nuoshing nodded. Seeing that it was not completely dead, he shrugged indifferently. The wood element and star force, which were full of vitality, gushed out of his body and slowly flowed into the body of the white fox, healing its frightening wound. Seeing the wound healing at a remarkable speed, Xian couldn't help but mutter, "The healing power of the wood element and the water element is so strong." Yun Nuoshing winked and said after a while, "Your 5 elements force is much stronger than mine, even if it's in an incomplete state." A few minutes later, Yun Nuoshing stopped the output of the wood element and the water element. He let out a light breath and opened his eyes. The small ball in his hand had all healed, and there were no scars left. Its fur was as white as snow, and its breathing had become smooth. It seemed to have come back to life, but it still hadn't woken up. After thinking for a while, Yun Nuoshing lifted his collar and hung the white fox around his neck. He felt its warm fur and its light breath on his neck. It was itchy. "It's a little itchy, but it's okay." After turning his neck, Yun Nuoshing pulled back his collar. When he saw the strange gazes of Yi Shi and the others, he coughed dryly and said, "Shao Shi, what's wrong?" I don't understand. I sealed this place tens of thousands of years ago. Unless it's under my control, no creature can enter this place. I also didn't receive any information that this place had been breached." Yi Shi scratched her head in distress. She couldn't understand how this dark cloud immortal fox had gotten past her array and entered this place. Don't think about things that you don't understand. Thinking too much will only give you a headache. What's important is that this happened. Yun Nuoshing picked her up, flicked her forehead, and smiled. Yi Shi nodded, seeming to agree with Yun Nuoshing's words. She didn't want to think too much about it. After leaving the barrier, Yun Nuoshing thought that Yi Shi had achieved her goal and wanted to take them away from Stardust City. Unexpectedly, Yi Shi said that she wanted to stay for a while and see an old friend. An old friend? Yun Nuoshing was very puzzled. Yes, he seems to have settled down here. I'll take a look on the way and taunt him while I'm at it. Yi Shi hummed and said something that made Yun Nuoshing and the others speechless. Taunt him? What did she mean by taunt, however? Yun Nuoshing didn't ask much. He just carried her and slowly walked in the direction that Yi Shi had pointed out. After walking for a while, they stopped in front of a small store. Yi Shi jumped down from Yun Nuoshing's arms and looked up at the store. A trace of nostalgia flashed across her eyes. She said with a smile, "This place seems to be the same as before." After saying that, Yi Shi waved her hand and walked into the store. Yun Nuoshing and the others quickly followed. The store was also of a certain size. Several long cabinets were placed against the wall, and there were layers upon layers of records such as books and crystal balls. Moreover, there was a transparent restriction in front of the cabinet. It seemed to be very thin, but one could feel that it was very tough. If one wanted to forcefully open it without a specific method, they would probably suffer a strong backlash. The store wasn't small, but it was cold and cheerless. A wall and a door separated the inside and outside of the store. There were no shop assistants here, and no one looked after it. However, with the restriction in place, there was no need to worry about theft. These seemed to be books about arrays. Yun Nuoshing opened his evil spirit eye and took a peek. He immediately understood what this store was for. It was selling ordinary arrays that were circulating in the market. Moreover, the grades weren't very low. Generally, they were around the quality of high-quality arrays. This kind of thing could be done by a high-quality array master. Yi Shi looked around and saw that there was no one in the store. She couldn't help but roll her eyes. She walked to the door between the two counters and fiercely raised her leg to kick it. She lightly shouted, "Damn pervert! Come out!" The sound of the door being kicked and the cursing caused Yun Nuoshing and the others to jump in fright. They looked at each other and helplessly shrugged their shoulders. Bang! A few seconds after the shout, the door suddenly opened with a loud bang. Then, a figure rushed out, causing Yun Nuoshing's pretty face to change. Just as she was about to pull Yi Shi back, she saw the figure suddenly rush in front of Yi Shi like a tiger kneeling on the ground. With a slide kick, he rushed in front of Yi Shi and stopped a few inches in front of her. Yun Nuoshing was stunned. Before he could figure out what was going on, he saw the figure excitedly reach out with both hands, holding Yi Shi's little feet, and heavily kissing her red boots. In a rather excited tone, he spoke incoherently in a trembling voice. "Oh, your Majesty, your noble and lowly servant, I have finally waited for the day of your return. Oh, looking at your travel-worn appearance, your Majesty, you have lost weight again. Please eat your lowly servant and let me heal you." When Yun Nuoshing, Xian, and the others heard this, their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. This voice was actually quite pleasant to the ears. It had a special charm to it. It was very delicate and soft, with a slight magnetism to it. However, it was ruined by this excited and trembling voice, especially the strange words and strange actions, The nostalgia in Yishi's eyes instantly disappeared, and the smile on her face disappeared. She looked at the small foot that was being held up by that person, and then she kicked out, kicking that person's chin. That person also cried out in pain and rolled out like a muffled gourd. He crashed into the counter, and his eyes were filled with stars. Familiar power. Oh, these familiar hot footprints. That's right, please trample on me. Honorable Demon King. That person jumped up like a carp and knelt at Yishi's feet. His head heavily hit the ground and made a hole, completely ignoring the fact that his soft and smooth hair had become messy. Damn pervert, it seems like you're still so perverted even after I've been away for so long. Yishi rolled her eyes and stepped on that person's head. She snorted and said, "Did Luo Lin and Yao come here?" "The four of them came back once. When this subordinate heard the news of your death, I was so desperate that my heart was about to break. Fortunately, your Majesty still came back. Those four actually dared to lie to me and say that your Majesty died in battle. The next time I see them, I'll kill them. My surname isn't Su." That person buried his face in the ground and said in an excited and clear voice. Seeing this special conversation scene, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but lick her lips and laugh bitterly. What kind of situation was this? After a long while, Yishi put down the foot that was stepping on that person's head. That person also slowly raised her head and gracefully patted the gravel on her forehead, revealing a rather beautiful face. Her facial features were exquisite, her eyes were sparkling and full of spirituality. Her hair was combed back and her black hair was tied into a ponytail behind her back. She had a somewhat handsome and masculine aura. Yun Nuoxing inadvertently glanced down, then turned her head and sighed in her heart. This young lady's figure was also very hot. This is Yun Nuoxing, Xian, Feng and Bing Er. These are all very important people to me. Don't let me see you doing anything bad to them. This is Su Yaoyao. Don't be fooled by her gentle name. She's actually a pervert. Yishi waved her hand and said. The last sentence was naturally directed at Yun Nuoxing and the others. Hello, big sister Su. Yun Nuoxing nodded at the woman named Su Yaoyao and laughed. As for the pervert that Yishi was talking about, he had already seen it for himself. Her Majesty's friends are naturally my friends as well. However, are you a man? Su Yaoyao straightened her back like a spear. Her bright eyes looked at Yun Nuoxing in confusion. This guy was actually a man? Brother Nua's outfit. I changed into it this time. It looks good, right? Yishi covered her mouth and laughed softly. Hearing this, Su Yaoyao's eyes widened as if she had heard something unbelievable. Yun Nuoxing was startled by her strange expression and hurriedly took a step back. Then, Su Yaoyao rushed over with a majestic gait. With a wave of her hand, she suddenly clamped down on Yun Nuoxing's shoulders and roared, Her Majesty the Queen changed your clothes? Changed your clothes? Changed your clothes with her own hands. Even I don't get such treatment. You? Yun Nuoxing was a little confused by the roar. However, before she could continue, Yishi rushed over and kicked Su Yaoyao away. The latter groaned and hit the wooden cabinet. She twitched a few times and stopped moving. Brother Nua, are you all right? Seeing Yun Nuoxing in a daze and wiping the saliva on her face, Yishi wrinkled her nose and said, Although Yaoyao is a pervert, she's very reliable. You'll get used to it after interacting with her for a long time. Yun Nuoxing looked at the unconscious Su Yaoyao in confusion and shook her head with a bitter smile. That Su Yaoyao was a netherworld king expert. The experts these days didn't have the demeanor of an expert at all. She had lived for a long time. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.